Thanksgiving gone wild. You won't believe what these people did. My grandma threatened to take a dump on the turkey if we didn't let her watch Jeopardy. And one of my most popular comments on the internet is about my grandma fecally defiling our turkey. What the frick, people? My aunt, uncle, and cousins make no food and take 90% of it home. They also get there late and leave first. My aunt decided to announce she got chlamydia as we started to eat, and my grandmother told her getting stuffed by random people is for turkeys. I laughed really hard. My stepbrother was just released for possession and distribution. Total black sheep of the family. He brings his girlfriend who's dosed up out of her mind. They proceed to eat nothing but turkey and rolls. Then she decides to go shoot up in my step-aunt's bathroom where we found her passed out. My stepbrother attempts to wake her up by punching her, in his words, in the cooter. The cops are called. My stepbrother's an unapologetic addict with a smackhead queen. They ruin literally every family function, but my stepmom throws tantrums if they're not invited, so we all just have to spectate it. I feel your pain, man. I stopped hosting events because I have too much nice crap for them to steal. But if I'd just disinvited them, it would have been a whole big family drama thing. We were hosting a young lady that my wife worked with, as well as her boyfriend. Halfway through dinner, and somehow the discussion got to how her and her brother once got super trashed on Robitussin, and the next thing you know, that was a really weird time. Everyone just got really quiet as we were trying to decide how to fill that one in and where to go with it. For some reason, they got really quiet after that. My father, rest in peace, was in the early stages of Alzheimer's, but had always been a bit of a raunchy weirdo. But as his condition presented itself, he'd say things that were shocking beyond description. For example, one Thanksgiving, with 10 to 12 people present, in the middle of dinner, as he was just starting to develop symptoms, people were talking about a woman friend who was going in for surgery. My dad spoke up and in a loud voice said, "What's she gonna do? Get her rectum and vajayjay reversed so that doing it in the butt will be easier?" He wondered aloud why no one laughed at his joke, and then went back to happily eating his turkey. The rest of us made a note to have him see the doctor on Monday. I'm not gonna lie, I would have tried to repress a laugh and, in all likelihood, painted the opposite person and the wall behind them with whatever I was drinking at the time. It's not a great joke, but it's outrageous enough to tickle me. This woman my cousin had just married stole a Costco-sized box of individually wrapped Cheez-It packages from our garage. I just happened to notice they were gone when putting food in the fridge. I asked about it publicly and she locked up, started stuttering and went to get them out of her car. She returned with the excuse, I thought these were mine. I have a box just like them at home. Bye. My uncle poured Crown Royal on his turkey and ate it. Hey, marinating meat is important, man. She was responsible for bringing the dessert. She showed up 3 hours late, and instead of bringing dessert, she brought an open bag of frozen pierogies. It was a real downer. My uncle shot the TV because of how the Lions were playing. Checking game histories, it would have definitely been 77. It was a 17-inch black and white TV with 2 knobs, one for VHF channels and one for UHF. He and my dad had started drinking early and the Lions were awful. After a bad play late in the game, he strolled into the bedroom, picked up his revolver and shot the TV. We ate dinner shortly after and then went to my grandma's house to watch the Cowboys game. My uncle brought a woman other than his wife. She was crazy, a practicing witch who would divine things about us on the spot, and ironically accused my other uncle of having an affair. She got drunk and grabbed me in the coat closet and then tried to smooch me, saying, "If only I were young again." I was 16. One of my aunts found out her husband was sleeping with her brother. She found one of her husband's shirts from a vacation they took with splooge on it in her brother's bedroom when she went to the bathroom. I wasn't surprised, though, to be honest. My husband's brother and his sister-in-law, who was married to his other brother, always disappeared for about 20 to 40 minutes at the same time. This happened for 4 years in a row before anyone got nosy enough to go looking for them. Sister-in-law is now married to the Thanksgiving hookup brother. My Aunt Janie took a bunch of Xanax and who knows what else, on top of a jug of Carlo Rossi that she had hidden in her room. She then proceeded to steal every spoon in the house while the rest of us were drinking and playing games. Every single spoon. We found them all in her purse. I've always wondered why just the spoons. Last year, my husband's grandma hosted Thanksgiving dinner at her house and asked us to provide the turkey. And no, this isn't even the trashiest part. We had to go spend Thanksgiving with my husband's dad's side that morning, so we dropped the turkey off on our way to his house. His grandma said we'd be eating at 4. We arrived back at his grandma's house at around 3:45, and everyone had already eaten all of the food, including the entire turkey. My aunt took all of the leftover turkey. All of it. My mother told our aunt to help herself to some leftovers, and she took 4/5 of a bottle of $350 whiskey. She got called out on this and claimed to have accidentally grabbed it. Sorry, sweetie, no big deal. And then she returned it half full. So either she chugged some in the car or she dumped some out in spite. Oh, she had a water bottle filled in the car for sure. My mother-in-law announces halfway through dinner that she's taking the rest of the turkey home. The turkey we bought and cooked. Before she leaves, she runs into the bathroom and leaves smelling like she crapped herself. My sister-in-law goes into the bathroom and she's in there forever. She comes out and asks who was in there before her. I answer, "Your mother." And she goes, "Oh, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Don't worry, I cleaned it up." To this day, she refuses to say what she saw there, but the bathroom was spotless. Faked a heart attack. So here's what happened. Grandmother didn't like my dad very much. She picked a fight with him, so he decided he was just going to go home. When Grandmother M realized that my stepmom, her daughter, was going to take Dad's side and go home as well, she yelled a lot and then, as a last-ditch effort, dramatically clutched her chest and collapsed very carefully. It was outside, and I guess she didn't want to bump her head or mess up her clothes. Dad offered to call 911, and Grandfather said it wasn't necessary, and when Grandmother realized nobody was taking her seriously, she opened her eyes, allowed Grandfather to help her up, and went inside with him while fake sobbing. You see, normally, she's quite nice, but she had her moments and really wasn't happy that her daughter had grown up and had a life. Holidays usually brought out the worst in her, which was weird because she loved cooking and celebrating. It was very surreal, and her husband was so embarrassed. Holy crap, my grandma did this at Christmas a couple of years ago. She's been banned from Christmas ever since. We have a tradition where we always eat crepes Christmas morning. My mom and I probably spent 2 days in the kitchen making 3 different types of crepe batter, crepe casserole, a whole bunch of yummy things. My grandma helped us make them, and this has been a tradition for years. Come Christmas morning, and everyone comes downstairs to open presents. We're all opening them, and someone notices my grandma is going crazy around the kitchen. We go over to see what she's doing, and it turns out she's decided that our crepe breakfast wasn't good enough, and she's thrown it all out. Instead, she was going to make the breakfast she wanted. Large stuffed French toast. My mom got really upset with her, and at breakfast everyone made a point to only eat the crepes we'd scavenged. My grandma then proceeded to fake a heart attack because we were being so mean to her. She fell to the floor clutching her chest, screaming she couldn't breathe and someone needed to go get her sleep apnea machine so she could get oxygen. Literally everyone just pretended not to notice and kept eating breakfast. She didn't talk to anyone for the rest of her week-long stay and hasn't been allowed at family events since. Some would say that it was pretty callous of this family to ignore an attention-starved woman who could still have, against the odds, been having a real heart attack in front of their eyes in a real-life boy who cried wolf scenario, but I'm just going to say that if your medical episode makes everyone who knows you roll their eyes and talk about sports, then real or not, that's probably a life sign that you should change. My father's girlfriend sat at the head of the table at my house and acted like she was the hostess, while monopolizing the entire conversation. I was her waitstaff. It was my first time meeting her. 12 years later, they're still together, but I haven't seen her in 11 years, 11 months, and 29 days. And it wasn't just the head of the table scandal of 2013 that sunk her for me. She said I should eat very little to watch my figure. It was my Thanksgiving meal. She said I should dye my hair. I like my natural color. She was disappointed in my husband's wardrobe choice for the evening. He looked fine, by the way, and the grand finale was that she told my father I was a B-word after the night was over, after everything I'd done to make her comfortable. I should also mention she's 10 years older than him, 85 at the time, and wears a full face of makeup. She dyes her hair dark every week and is very superficial. Not who I plan to be when I'm in my 80s. I think she's jealous of my relationship with him and is constantly wanting to assert herself as his number one. I'm perfectly fine with that, and it's awesome she keeps busy. I see my father all the time, and I'm perfectly happy with the arrangement. My kids had extra doses of time with her, so they're thrilled they don't see her anymore. They loved my own mother so very much. They were perfectly open to a relationship with her, but she's so vain and ridiculous that it just wasn't possible. My uncle and grandfather don't have a good relationship, but they were tolerating each other because, well, Thanksgiving. My uncle was cooking lasagna, and my grandfather decided to help. So he grated the cheese. He had to do this in another room because the kitchen was full of other people cooking. We have a big Thanksgiving of maybe 15 to 20 people who love to eat. I'd bought in the cheese and everything was going fine. Flash forward to dinner time, the food is coming in, and as tradition dictates, we always start with lasagna. My grandfather made some joke like, "I know you hate me, but at least I'm great," and then crap hit the fan. My uncle literally flew into a rage and was yelling at everyone because we didn't tell him he was using, quote, tainted cheese. He then said, "F it," and proceeded to flip the table with all the food. Then my grandfather called him outside to settle the score, which resulted in two grown men fist-fighting in the backyard, culminating with my granddad getting thrown into the pond that we lived off of and slicing his leg open on a jagged rock that he landed on. The rest of us ordered Chinese food and kicked the uncle out, and my grandfather refused the hospital because he had had a little too much holiday joy in him at the time. Surprisingly, my uncle hasn't come to holidays for years now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My brothers got into a fight. My oldest brother slept with my younger brother's new wife, who was like 20 years younger than him. They got into a fistfight and broke through the wall of their dad's trailer. The police had to be called, and that's why I stopped going to family evening. This was by no means an unusual occurrence, just the first thing that came to mind. You know, this sounded shocking until you said they broke through the wall of the trailer, and then it all made sense. Picked up an entire stick of butter with their hand to butter their corn. No wrapper, just bare hand to butter. This isn't an isolated thing, but if someone doesn't show up for Thanksgiving or Christmas, we automatically check the inmate records at the county jail. It's happened a few times that someone's absence is accounted for by an arrest or a jail stay. To explain, in 2016, my brother was a no-show for Christmas, and we checked the jail's website. We saw our unique last name on their roster and assumed he'd been arrested. Turns out it was my uncle. I never did ask my brother where he was that year. Mid-dinner, my great-aunt starts talking about how she has the squirts. Literal feces, diarrhea, the runs, the whole nine. Really makes you want to finish eating her green bean casserole. We were hosting Thanksgiving and prepared all of the food ourselves, and my mum spent all morning cooking and baking. My aunt, uncle, and cousins arrive right before dinner and walk in with a White Castle case and said they just stopped to eat a few minutes ago. We'd prepared Thanksgiving just for them, and they decided they wanted White Castle instead. See, my husband would do this but still eat the dinner. He likes to eat a lot, but he's always nervous of eating too much of something and there not being enough for everyone else. Wow, that makes him sound really huge. He's not, by the way. My uncle, who was hiding in Haiti for years during the baby doc days, snuck into the country somehow and showed up for Thanksgiving. Not 45 minutes later, a bunch of federal agents busted in and took him away. I was maybe 11 or 12, nobody ever explained the whole story to me. Okay, update. I've talked to Mum as I drove her to my sister's house lately. They prosecuted him under the RICO Act for moving money in and out of Haiti for baby doc. According to my mum, because I didn't see him much and this happened when I was young, he was ridiculously intelligent but was crooked from day one. He moved millions of dollars around while the people were struggling to eat. He was absolutely one of those people that worked harder at avoiding work than actually doing anything of any use to society. They searched the house too and took all of my dad's weapons. He was an avid deer and pheasant hunter, and my dad didn't get his stuff back for over a year. I do remember him getting a new deer rifle about that time, but like I said, I was young and had the attention span of a gnat. My dad's father-in-law got drunk and made an overt, unwanted move on my then-girlfriend, now wife. It makes the holidays a little less jolly. My aunt was sent to bed because she was too drunk last year and ended up falling down the stairs an hour later when she tried coming back. Classic drunk aunt. You know, I'm beginning to think that all of these movies I assumed greatly exaggerated how dramatic and chaotic Thanksgiving could be are in fact closer to the truth than I'm comfortable with. The humanity on display is upsetting here. Case in point, my aunt got drunk and then undressed. She ran down the street starkers after hitting on my cousin's boyfriend. Her kids saw it all. They were all under the age of 12. She then cried the whole of the next day because everyone was mad at her. I called Child Protection Services because she tried driving drunk with the kids. A few weeks later, she got drunk at the same house by the pool. She lost balance when she stepped into the pool filter. She first hit the pool, but caught herself with the hand that was holding the glass beer bottle. The shards of glass bottle ended up inside of her cheek and neck. After hitting the ground and passing out, she then rolled into the pool and would have died if the others hadn't fished her out. She's still an alcoholic. She's not invited to Thanksgivings anymore because she now does crystal. Okay, update. My family thought it was hilarious that this got so much attention. I'm at my mum's family's house, and this story was about my dad's sister. My mum's family is way more of Hicks, but fewer addiction problems. Also, my family said I got the story backwards. The pool incident was first. She had stitches on her face and her neck when she ran down the street undressed. And no, she's not hot at all, for those asking. Second update. After years of no contact, she showed up at my parents' house 2 days ago. She had been homeless for 12 days living in her car. She kicked the ex-con out of the car for the night to park her car in my parents' driveway. After a few short hours, she went back to the boyfriend, likely because she needed to get her fix. Also, she got fired from another nursing job. Another nursing job let her go without reporting her. My brother got trashed before dinner started and then slapped me at the table for being a mouthy woman. I just asked if he wanted mashed potatoes for reference. He then ran off to go throw up. My aunt got so drunk that oh my god, another one. Jesus. She stripped her clothes off, stood in our hallway undressed and silently for a few minutes before passing out in my brother's bed. He didn't know she was there when he went into his room to grab something. He ran back to the hallway and was like, "Why is Aunt X Starkers in my bed?" She's been in and out of rehab. Last Christmas she was drunk as well and sat in the $60 brownie cheesecake. $60 brownie cheesecake? Damn, that alone would tee me off if that was destroyed. We were. I yelled at my cousin to pull it away as I saw her going down, but she wasn't quick enough. "Well, you really sat in the $60 brownie cheesecake this time, didn't ya?" is my new euphemism for everything. Just every Thanksgiving with my mother-in-law. My wife and I host. About 15 people came and everyone bought side dishes, as is the custom. Not her mother. She only brings stuff for herself. She proudly announces that whatever she bought is just for her. It's not for diet purposes because she eats all the other food too. When dessert makes an appearance, she'll make a big scene about wanting the first piece instead of letting the kids get theirs and get out of the way. One year there was a big argument about the corner pieces of a chocolate cake. She went first, as usual, cut herself 2 corner pieces and took them both. If you want to make little kids cry, do that. She wouldn't give them up though. Also, she treats our guest room and bath like a hotel. When she leaves, she takes the toilet paper rolls, the Kleenex box, paper towels, and soap. Just to address some of the questions I'm getting in one fell swoop, she's not fat and she's not senile. She's invited every year because my wife is the only family that she has, and my wife would feel tremendously guilty if she didn't invite her. It's not much of an excuse, but that's why. And if you're horrified by the above, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I could really make your head spin with her behavior on the 364 days of the year that aren't Thanksgiving. My mother-in-law died one September after knowing that she had cancer for less than a year. My parents invited her widower husband to have Thanksgiving with us. He spent so much time giddily talking about dating apps. My husband was not amused. My aunt and uncle showed up to dinner an hour late. My aunt then proceeded to yell at all of us because we started eating without her. The rest of the family still makes jokes about it, and some are still not on speaking terms with her. One of my mum's friends was invited to our Thanksgiving because her kids were at their significant others' families for the holiday. That year, my uncle bought a bottle of homemade limoncello to share. The stuff was delicious, but it was also 50% alcohol. Everyone was drinking it out of little 1-ounce glass cups. My mum's friend instead poured herself a full wine glass, half the bottle when nobody was looking, and downed it in 15 minutes, and then tried to go back for more. She passed out drunk at least an hour before dinner even began. Honestly, I think if you can deal with the overwhelming sweetness of a full glass of that stuff, you're a different kind of human to most of us. It's damn sugar water. I didn't realize how trashed it could get you though, although maybe your special one was different. Also, just in the interest of evening out the 2 au naturel aunt stories we've had before, my blasted uncle stripped off his clothes and got buck for the "what do you give thanks for" speeches. No joke. Best day ever. I was at my wife's uncle's house for Thanksgiving, and his wife decided right after dinner to play their wedding video, because it was also their anniversary weekend. She looks for half an hour to find the videotape, finds it, and gathers the whole dinner party of 25-ish people to the back room area, plays the video, and right as she's walking down the aisle, Midway down the aisle, it goes fuzzy, and it cuts to Dale Earnhardt's funeral. Uncle Joe had used that tape to record Dale Earnhardt's funeral. Granted, it was in a small town in Michigan where the NASCAR track is, but still. Everyone froze in complete shock, and I started laughing and felt like I was in a sitcom, but it was real life. I was expecting their bedroom activities, I'm not gonna lie. Oh, this happened at my family gathering. Grandma and Grandpa were bringing out the family tapes with me and the cousins at the beach as tiny children, and then halfway through one of the tapes, you guessed it, tape cuts to Grandma and Grandpa getting it on back in the early 90s, with me, my mom, and my wife, and the cousins as witnesses. An actual family fight broke out. We had to call the cops and everything. My grandpa got a fine, my uncle was arrested, my step-grandmother's oldest daughter was arrested as well. Before my uncle and grandpa passed away, we wouldn't let them live it down. It was glorious. When I say fight, I mean people on the floor throwing punches. We never went back to my grandpa's for Thanksgiving after that. This was when I was between 8 and 9. We actually did go back 1 year, and my aunt gave us all food poisoning. My mum was literally dragging my brother and I into the ER because of how bad the poisoning was. I've not eaten anything she's cooked since.
Redditors who work in the ER, what's the scariest, dumbest, or weirdest thing someone has come in for? Had a lady come in for shortness of breath, began to place an oxygen mask on her, and she yells, "I'm allergic to oxygen!" and pulls the mask off. I heard the doctor laugh behind the curtain. Maybe that's why she had shortness of breath? Morbidly obese guy came in for lower right quadrant pain. I lifted up his gut and found his lost wallet. Solved 2 problems at once. 20-year-old male came in for stomach pains, said he was hungry and hadn't eaten in 2 days. Maybe you should try a sandwich. I have a male cousin who landed himself in the ER because he thought that instead of a condom, he could put something tightly around his male appendage and it would force everything to stay inside. Unfortunately, getting it off posed a problem and he ultimately wound up in the ER with a zip tie around his male appendage. His nickname has been Zippy for 5 years now. So, did it work? My friend worked in ER. She had an obese man come in complaining of a rash under his gut. Upon close examination, they found several splinters. When asked, the man casually replied, "Oh, that must have been from the love board." So the crew had to ask for details. Apparently, the couple had to use a board to pry the man's gut up to get to his business for lovemaking activities. Well, there's an image in my mind I'll never lose. A girl came in saying she was miscarrying, claimed 27 pregnancies and 0 live births, says that in the last 2 years since she went on birth control to help regulate her periods, she's had a miscarriage every month. We had to explain to her that she was experiencing regular periods. You know, this is why you need to pay attention in health class. My aunt is a nurse and this is her story. 2 extremely drunk men come in. One of them fell down the stairs and somehow got glass in his eye. They had pulled out the glass and sealed the gash in his eye with super glue. They had to soak the eye in acetone to get it open. That's terrifying. I'm an X-ray tech and the hospital I used to work at had a lot of homeless people come in. This one man came in and there was an order to X-ray both his feet. As soon as I got to the hallway with his room, there was a nasty smell. I got to his room, opened the door, and almost puked. He was soaking his feet in water and it was the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life. His skin was peeling off and getting stuck to the X-ray board. I had to stop a couple times, but I kept my poker face. One case that really freaked me out was a guy that came in that was around my age, mid-20s. He was having severe pain in his shoulder, but claimed he didn't injure it. He gets taken back and gets x-rays done and finds out his body is absolutely riddled with cancer. He was given 1 year to live. The family's reaction to the news was so heartbreaking to witness and something I'll never forget. A number of things come to mind, but top 3 without thinking. 1. Man with a 10-inch cucumber in his rectum. Didn't mention said cucumber until the MD noticed a bump on his stomach. Still didn't say anything until we got a CT result. Number 2. Older man came in with a vibrator in his rectum. Wife couldn't get it out and refused to come with him. Number 3. Younger male came in with priapism. Urologist was called in to drain it. One of the most bloody, horrifying things I've ever seen. I saw him again 3 days later for the same thing. I honestly don't know what a priapism is, and I'm not Googling it. My mom used to work in an ER. When patients came in, she was the one who took their insurance, asked about their symptoms, took their vitals, and things like that. One day, she's entering paperwork for a woman whom I think came in for injuries to her hands, but I don't quite remember. Mom's taking her information, and one of the questions is the patient's occupation. The woman says, "Oh, I'm a stripper. I work for Dinty Moore." Mom responds that she had no idea Dinty Moore hired strippers. The woman says, "No, I'm a stripper," and gestures emphatically in the air with her bleeding hands. Turns out she strips the meat off of cowtails. That's apparently what the meat is in Dinty Moore beef stew, cowtail. I was shadowing in the ER once and this big white lady came in with this massive bruise around her lower stomach area. The doc asked what happened and she responded, "My horse kicked me in my pooter." And I just bit my lip and turned around to force myself to not immediately bust out laughing. Had a car crash through our ambulance bay, action movie style. The entire car was well within the building when it finally stopped. It was a 16-year-old kid carrying his 14-year-old brother who had been shot in the abdomen over some gang stuff. Many people had just vacated that area seconds earlier because there was a CPR that came in, and they were all in the trauma room working on that. If they hadn't been, then there would have been a lot of injuries. I used to work in the accident and emergency department in our city hospital. Without a doubt, the worst thing I ever dealt with was the police and social services bringing in a 2-year-old who had been immediately removed from his home after a child protection visit. The parents had stubbed out lit cigarettes on the child's eyes, on his actual eyeballs. He had the most horrific injuries, both old and new. I'll never forget prepping the child for surgery to have his eyes removed. The fact that any human could do this to another, especially a child and their own flesh and blood, is the scariest thing ever for me. Those people should be buried under the prison. Honestly, that's just awful. So we're going to take a hard 180 here and go back to something funny. Guy came in with a salt shaker lodged in his butt, said he was changing a light bulb, then somehow fell onto it. How do they always fall onto it? My sister had a patient who was interested in having her clitoris pierced but was afraid of the pain. Curious, she affixed a super strong magnet on top of and below the clitoris but couldn't remove them. By the time she got to the hospital, her tissue was essentially dead. The doctor had to scrape the magnets off as there was no other way to remove them. I'm a man and was born with all requisite parts, so you know just how serious this is when I say that story made my clitoris hurt. One time the news was playing on the TVs in the waiting rooms. The anchor mentioned a man shot in a gang-related fight who later died from his injuries. Suddenly, my parents hear screaming and crying in the other room. It was the family of the guy who got shot. They had not been informed yet. Oh, that's terrible. How is the news finding out before the parents who are in the waiting room? Come on, guys. I had a guy who put a flare gun between his legs, I guess pretending it was his thing, and fired it. 3rd-degree burns to the groin are not fun. Probably the dumbest one I've had was a husband and wife who rode in an ambulance together, both clearly drug-seeking. For whatever reason, they were placed in rooms across the hall from each other and kept yelling back and forth about what drugs they were getting. The ambulance was initially called for the wife who had fallen downstairs. No injuries visible or on x-rays. The husband rode in with them and checked in, claiming the wife had fallen into him and taken them both to the ground. The husband's only injury was where he said his feet had tangled in the steps. There was no bruising, swelling, abrasions, nothing. But he had clearly just manually pulled out 5 of his toenails. They were not contiguous toes and it involved both feet. just the nails. Emergency medicine is the daily interface in the process of natural selection, so it takes something truly stupid or crazy to shock me these days. Here's a couple highlights from me. Had a guy come in with a plastic hanger, the hook part, stuck in his cornhole. As it went in, it snapped and broke away from the body of the hanger. Next, the 50-year-old dude who came in with generalized abdominal pain said he had no idea what was going on. Super nice guy, talkative, very friendly. We do an abdomen acute x-ray and all you see is a massive set of batteries floating in his colon. Yep, giant dildo lodged way too far in. Off to the OR he went. Lastly, the nice couple who came in after a vigorous boning session because she broke his thing. One interventional radiology study later, where they inject dye into his urethra to test for patency, and the dye wouldn't advance, showing a stricture in the urethra. Off to the OR he went. One of the stranger complaints I've heard as a resident. I had a 19-year-old guy come into the emergency department on the night shift on 4/20 this year. His complaint was that he got high and he decided he should touch himself and his urethra felt harder than normal. Not his thing, his urethra. I got to the room to assess him and he was in the bathroom peeing. His poor girlfriend was sitting in the corner with her head in her hands out of embarrassment. He got back from the bathroom, stood in the doorway and said, "You know, I feel better now. I think I'm just gonna go home." And then he turned around and walked out. So wait, he just had to pee? I used to be an EMT, and one time we got called to a house in the middle of the night for a patient with belly pain. We get to his house and he's bent over a chair in extreme pain. We get him in the ambulance and start taking him to the ER. The whole drive he's letting out tiny farts that are deadly, also yelling that he just needs to fart. Can't we give him something to make him fart? The ER doc asks us if there's a possibility of a foreign body issue, and I say that I didn't check. The doctor sends him to the CT scanner where he lets rip a fart that echoed. He felt better and left the ER. They had to close the scanner to air it out. You know what? I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to be the next patient walking into that place. I have two friends that are nurses in ER. Friend A said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle stuck in his butt. Friend B said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle jar up his butt. Will everyone stop putting things up their butt? I had a guy walk in completely impaled with a 4x4 wood post. He was drinking and working on his roof when he fell off. His buddy got a chainsaw, cut the bottom off the post, and somehow the impaled guy stood in the back of the pickup truck for the ride to the ER. He walked in the reception area and said, "Hey everybody, I hope you don't mind if I cut in line a bit. This seems quite serious," and promptly passed out. He survived. I worked in an ER for a little over 2 years and as an EMT running 911 calls for another 2. I have plenty of stories, but this one's pretty good. So these two 20-ish-year-old girls come in and they're lovers. Apparently they had been fooling around and one girl stuck a bottle of hand sanitizer in the other's butt. The bottle was about the same size as a shampoo bottle. Well, it got stuck, so they came in to have it removed. The doctor was able to pry it out of her butt and he threw the bottle in the trash. The girls were discharged and the girl's nurse, who we'll call Steven, and myself walk in to clean the room for the next patient. Steven says to me, "Hey, check this," reaches into the trash and pulls out the offending bottle of hand sanitizer with his bare hands. He squeezes a huge dollop of the gel in his palms and rubs his hands together, laughing hysterically. That was one of the weirdest. Also, once in medical school, I was doing a clinical at a very small 3-bedroom ER in a very rural town, and this giant fat lady accidentally burned her left breast off trying to pour a giant pot of boiling pine sol on the floor. First, the whole hand sanitizer thing, I get that you're cleaning it with the hand sanitizer after, but it's just gross. Second, burnt off? A colleague told me this one. Man came in with a major rager that wouldn't go away. Claims he hadn't taken any drugs, but I have no idea if that's true or not. Turns out he woke up with it, then went to work for a full day before coming to emergency to get checked out. I honestly don't know what happened after that. I don't work in ER, but in a hospital. Back in West Virginia, girls used to come in frequently for just a pregnancy test. Not like they sell them in the dollar store or anything. My absolute favorite was a 23-year-old who came in at like 3 a.m. because their sunburn was itchy. There was also a guy who had a baseball-sized festering stinky sore on the top of his head. He had had it for over a year and was just wearing a baseball cap and ignoring it. You could smell him from the hallway. A dude shot some kind of injectable Mexican Viagra into his thing so he could have some fun with his girlfriend. Turns out he basically totaled his junk. Urology told us that it was never gonna work again. Best part was, he had a wife who he had to explain this to. Finding out that some old dude with a part of his intestine hanging out of his abdomen that drips out poop all the time, and who's unable to get a hard-on without shoving a needle into his business, is somehow married and has a girlfriend while I'm still single as hell, was quite a realization. Well, if it makes you feel any better, he's probably not going to have either for long. So my brother works in the ER. A guy came in the middle of the night with a carrot stuck in his butt. He said he was walking in his garden and fell. Another was a couple who came separately to the ER at night. The girl had a heavily bruised head or something like that, and the guy had a crooked thing. Apparently, while the girl was giving the guy a little bit of fun, she had a seizure, her jaw clenched, and the guy panicked and hit her with something. The situation with the couple sounds awful in so many ways. My brother had two varsity football players, rivals from rich AAAs no less, come in with fractured arms, shoulders, and concussions. They actually had to choose between getting them out of their pads and physically restraining them when their screaming alerted one another that they were both in the same ER. Both of them had functioning legs and both were in cleats. There were stitches for staff afterwards. Don't you guys have other stuff to worry about in this moment besides your school rivalry? Come on. My aunt said it was incredibly common for people to come in complaining about terrible stomach pains only to be told that they had a, well, buttload of poop that they just needed to get out. I worked in ER billing, not the ER, but this story actually makes me incredibly angry. I had a less than 10-year-old kid's chart with codes for nausea, vomiting, and a broken rib. So I, being Snoopy and having time to waste, opened up the nurse's notes instead of just entering the info. Turns out the kid swallowed his toothpaste after brushing instead of spitting it out. Mom of the Year freaked out and gave the kid the Heimlich, to the point of breaking her own son's rib. An honorable mention goes to the lady who came in with her workers' comp insurance info ready to go for a laceration, which is pretty common. But in the section for laceration repair, the nurse had angrily scribbled through dermabond and sutures and whatnot to handwrite tiny band-aid in the box. Yeah, this lady went to the ER and wasted a whole bunch of people's time for a paper cut. My godmother was a surgical tech, and the best weird stories all involve things stuck up people's butts. Bottles of Windex, shaving cream cans, tubes for gerbils. Did you know putting live gerbils in your butt was a thing? I didn't know that. The worst part was half of the patients she saw for the "I shouldn't have put that in my butt" were repeat offenders. Then there was the older patient who called her in because he couldn't find his appendage. Turns out he had a ton of foreskin and couldn't pee. Mom had to glove up and use a tongue depressor to uncover the head of his business so he could pee. The ER is full of crazy stuff like this. While I was sitting in a waiting room, a man comes in, maybe 50 to 60 years old, goes up to the counter and tells the lady, "Yeah, I don't know if this is cause for concern or not, but I went to bed on Tuesday night and woke up today." It was Saturday morning, 3 days later. He was told to have a seat and I was out of there soon after, but I've always wondered what the story was behind that one. My curiosity's been piqued here too. Yeah, I'd be going to the hospital too. Please give me an answer to what just happened. A guy came to the ER with an arrow through his head. We thought he was wearing one of those Halloween props, but no, it was real. Watching the neurosurgeons trying to maintain composure when examining the patient was priceless. He went straight to surgery and, from what I understand, did very well. Yeah, I'm sure the surgeons don't have to deal with something quite like this very often. At the time, I was working as a transporter in the radiology department. We shuttle patients in the building to and from tests. I get a page to pick up a patient from our green zone in the ER, non-emergent. I walk into the nursing unit and start looking for the nurse. They see me and get that weird smile on their face. The type of smile in healthcare that makes you worry about what type of patient you're going to be picking up. I walk into the patient's room, introduce myself, and then explain we're off to x-ray. The patient is a very unassuming 20-something-year-old male, non-belligerent, and answers my identification questions very calmly. If anything, he just looks slightly red-faced. I ask him if he's able to walk, and he explains that he's having stomach issues and really would prefer not to. No big deal. I have him get his legs on the stretcher they use as beds in the room and wheel him on over to x-ray. Get him in the room, close the door, and go to fetch the techs to take the images. Now, our x-ray staff is full of seasoned techs with 10+ years of experience on average each. The tech looks at the order and tells me to wait around since it won't be long. Alright, no problem. The tech comes back from the exam room, super quiet about 6 minutes later with a slight smirk. She waves the other techs over to a computer in the back room, away from the patient, chuckles, and pulls the images she just took to be fixed up. Two of the younger female techs bolt away from the computer, hands to mouth, and slam the door. One of the techs whistles, and the older female techs, almost in unison, go, "Well, that could cause an abdomen complaint." Very visible in the rectal cavity was a large toy. Long story short, the patient told the tech that he had a new girlfriend and she wanted to try something new. Little do most people realize that it gets to be like a vacuum to get things out of there, and up it went. 5 hours later, he was released after it was removed, the old-fashioned way. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire video has been a PSA. Don't stick stuff up your butt.
Boys, be completely honest. What makes a girl go from a 10 out of 10 to a 1 out of 10 instantly? Was on a first date once with what seemed like a sweet girl, and she then bragged to me how she and her best friends would go to clubs and hit on ugly guys to lead them on, then laugh at them for thinking they had a chance. She was actually proud of this. Constantly complaining about everything and everything. There has to be something you enjoy. That, or never taking responsibility for your own faults and always having to blame someone else for it. My last boyfriend did this, my last boyfriend did that. Well, damn, girl, why don't you go back to your last boyfriend then?
Fellow men, please, you gotta stop doing such nice things for your girls. It makes the rest of us look bad when we can't exactly keep up with the standard.
I'm joking, of course. It absolutely sucks to be constantly compared to someone else that you are not. Mine is the same as another earlier comment. Had been seeing a smoking hot woman. Looked like a Robert Palmer girl. Then she kicked my cat. What was funny was Bip the cat then stalked and attacked her by leaping from a chair and latching onto her arm. You didn't mess with Bip the cat. He was my bro. 1. Physical violence. 2. Infidelity. 3. Illegal substance abuse. 4. Scientology. 5. Needless cruelty. Treating restaurant staff badly, dishonesty, manipulative behavior. I was seeing someone much more attractive than anyone I've ever dated before. She was pretty chill and interesting, and on our third date, we went to my favorite restaurant and she was rude to the staff. I was so embarrassed that not only did I break up with her, I went back to the restaurant afterwards to apologize. Service work sucks enough without someone being awful. I'm a little mad and embarrassed now, a year later, thinking about that awful date. You know what? I'd probably break up with them too. If that's your favorite restaurant and you know the staff, that would be super embarrassing. I'd be mortified. If they feel the need to do a TikTok dance in the middle of busy public areas. 1. Playing on the phone while having an in-person conversation. 2. Littering. 3. Being a crappy parent. No hobbies. I don't want someone who wants me to entertain them. I want someone who has their own life and their own friends and doesn't feel abandoned if I want to spend time on my own or going out with my own friends. Yeah, I gotta hard agree on that one. If someone doesn't have any friends or hobbies or anything like that to preoccupy their own time and they're constantly just like, no, I need you for company and entertainment and everything because I have no one, it can be really unhealthy for a relationship. Had a girl once who basically assumed that not constantly texting was akin to no interest at all. Any time after the conversation would naturally go stale, or after a pause in replies, I would get a, "What are you up to?" or what's up? And of course, I'd just be honest and say, browsing Reddit, haha. Like, there's only so many ways you can make one's downtime be interesting for a conversation's sake. Ironically enough, that was one of the many factors that did contribute to me losing interest in her. It is exhausting being someone's sole source of happiness and entertainment. I was in love with a girl when I was a teen. I was smitten. She was a 10 out of 10. She had a cat. One day, it made her mad, and she grabbed the cat and hurled it against the wall. I instantly despised her from there on. Since she lived close, I also stole said cat a few weeks later. She didn't deserve Muffin. I renamed him afterward. I don't think she ever noticed. I didn't talk to her anymore. Had a date a few weeks ago. We agreed to meet at a local restaurant that has 2 locations. She wanted to go to the closer one by the highway. To be fair, I was about 3 or 4 minutes late, but I walked in and she wasn't there. She actually went to the wrong one, but she got mad at me for it. I attempted to salvage the date and we agreed to order takeout and meet at her place. The address she gave me was wrong. She lived at Street Place, and the address she told me was Street Drive, which are about 15 minutes away from each other. She's messaging me about how impatient she's getting the whole time I'm trying to decipher where I'm supposed to go. I don't text and drive, and she got upset that I wasn't responding to her. So 1 gets upset with you for their mistake. 2 gets upset with you for their mistake. 3 gets mad at you that you aren't endangering yourself and others by texting and driving. One time I dated this girl I met from Tinder. We went on adventures like hiking and rollerblading, and it was getting a little more serious. We slept together after the 3rd date, and I wanted to see her again the next day after we both worked because I fall easily and become like monogamous after our sex. So we go to work, and afterward we decide to go to the bar with some of my friends. I wanted to introduce her to them and kind of flex, show her off a bit. We get there, and I swear to God, when she met my friend Jesse, she completely ignored me for the rest of the night and left with him. They ended up getting together and split after a few months, and she had the gall to text me to hang out again after. I think I'm still emotionally scarred from that. She was perfect with just the 2 of us, and then she had zero loyalty to me in a social setting. To be fair, I never communicated that I wanted us to be exclusive, but I still felt betrayed by both of them. That is now my biggest flag I look for. Yeah, buddy, Jesse is clearly not a friend. And to be absolutely honest, if I met a woman who then went on to try and flirt and have sex with my friends afterwards, I would be like, nope, you're a problem. Get the hell out of here. Girls who think using an Android phone is a deal breaker. Saying really mean stuff about people they just hung out with. Inability to be accountable or apologize, being rude to service industry folk, no self-awareness, generally being a spoiled or narcissistic person. Overly obsessed with the devil's lettuce. I don't care if people want to have a smoke to wind down at the end of a workday, but if it's your only hobby and topic of conversation, it gets boring real fast. She continually tells me throughout the date that I'm small enough that she could probably bench press me. It happened. She wouldn't stop repeating it. It got real annoying real fast. I was picturing the pig from Duckman saying that. I can't remember his... Corn-fed. Anyway, just a personal thing. Is anyone else like really tired of the simping for like muscular women or like muscular characters in fiction and stuff? With the whole like, oh, break me like you're baited, I am the Batman mummy, please. It's just so incredibly cringe. Being dumb as a brick. If she doesn't know what she's talking about and likes to argue a lot. The princess attitude in general, but most specifically when it comes to finances. Don't get me wrong, I want to buy/do nice things for my girlfriend, but I hate doing things like that because they are expected of me. I want to do them because I want to do them and make people I care about happy. The second I get, you can't afford me vibes, I am out. We probably don't have much in common anyway, and I want a partner, not an extra expense. Life is hard enough without a constant attitude and headache when they don't get everything they want. Acting malicious towards the elders, animals, or children. Victim mentality. Someone who doesn't take responsibility for her own mistakes. 0 out of 10 when the individual must have a phone in hand in order to showcase everything we're doing whilst doing it. Under the guise of sharing. Put down your phone when you're with another human being. Everything that was on the web will still be there when you return to it. And all the new stuff? Well, that'll be there too. I too hate that. Am I guilty of it sometimes because, well, you know, a lot of my work is online and whatnot? Yes, but it's becoming more of a generational issue. When she tries to make me believe that all of her exes were abusive, deadbeats, cheaters, and man-children, and she had absolutely no role in her past relationships falling apart. I mean, in all fairness, just about anyone can do that. Bad hygiene, i.e. bad breath, bad body odor, dirty fingernails. When they just trauma dump on you relatively quickly after meeting, I get it, and I want to be emotionally available, but sometimes it's just too much too soon. When she turns out to be actually just 3 kids in a trench coat. I know that's just an old joke in general with a bunch of kids pretending to be an adult man or woman or whatever, but I can't help but think, like, are they specifically referencing BoJack Horseman? Unapologetic alcoholism. I can't hang with a woman who regularly passes out drunk at 9 p.m. and then goes to work at 6 a.m., even if she's totally functional. If they use my gender as a weapon against me, like, why don't you act like a man? Or, man up and do it. Or, a real man would be able to. I have fortunately not experienced this directed at me by a date or girlfriend, but I have heard women say this about other guys. Screw that. Screw you for saying that. I'm part of a group that conducts research on psychology of men and masculinity. I know exactly how far this goes to keeping men trapped in the worst versions of masculinity and masculine behavior. These statements that are aimed at hurting men are just the worst kind of manipulative, awful behaviors, and most people don't even realize how bad it is. But it's like I've seen too much. I know how much it affects things at a societal level, not to mention how personally insulting it is. A vegan who looks down on and actively attacks non-vegans. Just for context, I'm vegetarian. It was hard enough for me to become vegetarian after 20 years of shoving chicken tenders and sushi down my gullet. Went on a date with a 10 out of 10 girl to a casual dining restaurant, and I dared to have cheese in my food. She scolded me, publicly raised her voice and everything. People looked at us to see what the fuss was about. The rest of the conversation, her body language consisted of judgment and eye rolls. Mind you, this was the first date. She still asked me if I wanted to go back to her place that night. It was a big nope. Oh my god, you cannot control what someone else wants to put in their body as much as you'd like to. You just can't. Unless, of course, I guess that person is killing themselves, literally, with the amount of crap that they're shoveling down their gullet, in which case, if it's not that, you're probably just a butt of a human being, or a control freak. Materialism, luxury brands, inability to have a philosophical or abstract conversation. Being a litter bug.
When she says anything along the lines of, my presence is a present.
Cigarettes. Emotional immaturity, inability to properly communicate her problems or feelings, inability to take accountability and remediate bad behavior or actions, narcissism, and all those fun dark triad traits, inability to take constructive criticism, the list goes on.
1, star signs, just don't. 2, posting multiple selfies a day on social media. I hate myself too much to be with someone that narcissistic. 3, live, love, laugh, merchandise. Basic. 4, loves drinking. Personal reason. I'm a recovering alcoholic who's currently sober. 5, likes having sex with people who aren't me. I'm just a monogamous person. Sue me. 6, treat their family like crap. Different if it's with abusive family members. 7, overspending on luxury items. I'm a simple man and a thrifty woman like my GF are a turn on. She finds bargains like bloodhounds find bodies. 8, highly extroverted. I'm highly introverted. I can't be around people of any gender with that much social energy. 9, overly touchy. Even in a platonic way, just a personal space thing. 10, persecution complex. Just shows a lack of accountability when their crappy lives are everyone else's fault. It's 2023, sort your crap out, nobody's stopping you. 11, born and raised in a religious cult. Another personal one for me, long story. 12, ridiculously long acrylic nails. Other than getting in the way of wearing gloves for a dirty job or the sound they make when they hit solid objects, I really have no other reason. I really like my back scratchies, but not when they draw blood. 13, upspeak, goes both genders. Basically, just a sign that your personality is undeveloped. Sorry if a lot of that makes me sound like a douche, but they asked for honesty and I honestly sat down for like 20 minutes to think about all of this.
Honestly, astrology is up there. Not like a mild interest or anything, but if you make real decisions based off it and really believe, honestly, the same kind of goes for any spiritual or religious stuff, but the people I know only do astrology. Probably the exact same things that take a guy from a 10 to a 1. Just being a crappy person pretty much destroys physical attractiveness regardless of gender. Yeah, I do agree with this person. It's just that people decided, it's gonna be a boys topic. Yeah, get the boys in here.
Whipping out a bigger Johnson than mine.
Silent treatment and emotional manipulation. Grow up and talk about your feelings. But talk, not scream or yell when it's advantageous, but silent treatment when it's not. Take 5, have a breath, and come back and talk.
Racism, size queen, and serious substance abuse.
Ignorance. Smoking.
Smoking. On the surface, smoking and those fake nails. I cannot express how much I hate fake nails. Inside, aggressive tendencies, infidelity, lying, arrogance, and ignorance. So everyone here is saying smoking, but I do wonder if they consider vaping to be the same thing, because I know so many people who are like, oh, smoking and vaping, it's not the same thing. It's nothing alike. And it's like, yeah, no, it's the same thing. Personally, I don't really give a crap. Narcissism. Oh, mate, I'm sorry to say, but narcissism is like a freaking epidemic nowadays. Treating others like crap, lacks any form of empathy or any human decency whatsoever, manipulator, is a cheater, hates animals, dogs, cats, etc., displays narcissistic tendencies, being too self-centered/egotistical to the point you constantly put others down to feel better, continues to smoke/vape, just a preference since I don't like to surround myself with people who could give me lung cancer, is a far right-winger, yeah, no thanks. Went on a date with a girl about 8 or 9 years ago, not necessarily a 10 out of 10, but I was interested. Until she asked how much money I made. At the time, it wasn't much, maybe $40K, but she made it very clear that her 5-year plan was to marry a guy that makes good money, have a kid or two, and be a stay-at-home mom. She was a pediatric nurse making $100K by herself. She was willing to give that up just so she could stay at home as a housewife/mom. Last I checked, she's still single. When they're gorgeous, but arrogant about it. Dated a girl that always talked down on other women or criticized their appearance. Even if we were just watching a TV show, I had to hear her dissect exactly which aspects of which female character's face she didn't like. Ugh. Nothing. If she's really a 10 out of 10 and is willing to settle for little old me, then as far as I'm concerned, I'll overlook the whole serial killer thing. I mean, she's a 10, right? Who am I to judge? No amount of pretty is worth 1 ounce of drama. Women who throw food or drink containers out of the car. You know, I totally get it. It's relevant to what your principles are, what you respect, what you don't respect, your likes and dislikes, whatever. But a lot of these, have really not even been relevant to gender or anything. I was really expecting, like, right off the bat, if she treats me like crap and then blames her period or something like that. That is something that is only relevant to women. She didn't like dogs, particularly my Labrador, objecting to him being inside the house and sleeping at the foot of my bed on the floor. Said it was either him or her sleeping outside. I gave her a blanket to keep warm. Constantly talking about other people's business or regularly saying bad things about people when they are not around. I understand a little gossip here and there, but it is repulsive to me when someone constantly talks about someone else's life in a harsh or judgmental way. Main character syndrome, turning every interaction into something about themselves. Announcing that they strive to become an influencer. Talking about other guys' peckers and past SX lives, biggest turnoff for me. I keep my past in the past and I don't talk about my experiences with other women to them. Keep it classy. Septum piercings. I completely get that one. Septum piercings are such a hit or miss look depending on the person. Realistically, nothing. Every single person who has weighed in on this has lied to you. Once you breach a certain level of hot, basically, anything goes. You'll ignore as many red flags as you need. You'll start making excuses for behaviors you despise and make excuses for why you've done so. Desire drives people to every compromise you can think of, and we're all capable of doing horrible things to ourselves for someone we think deserves it. You know, personally, I actually do agree with this one. I have seen people fall over themselves for a pretty face and just go against the things that, as far as I knew about them, they believed quite strongly in. But then pretty lady walks in. Whenever a really pretty lady talks to me and is very clear that she knows how pretty she is and she thinks she can basically get me to say or do whatever she wants, it immediately turns me off, to be honest, because I don't know, I hate giving things to people who expect it. And yes, that does in fact include gratification. Bad manners. Being a Disney adult. Assuming I can read their mind. If you can't handle me at my worst, then you sure as hell don't deserve me at my best. Ooh, I hate that too. I hate that so goddamn much. Everything about that saying I despise. Telling stories about how she completely ruined someone's day in a personal and targeted way for minorly inconveniencing her in the course of doing their goddamn job. No, I am not impressed at how petty you are prepared to be to someone who made a minor mistake. If she's that hot, nothing could do it instantly, short of witnessing her murder someone. Instead, it will be a gradual process as the brain starts doing the thinking again.
Any variation of the you should already know / I shouldn't have to tell you why. I'm not a psychic. I'm not here to play a goddamn guessing game. If you're incapable of having a rational, grown-up conversation about your feelings, I'm out. Played that game too many times and I'm sick of it.
One word replies. When I was on dating apps, I saw that a bunch where it'd be like, I love engaging good conversation. And it's like you attempt to have a conversation with them about something, but they don't do anything to actually move the conversation along or expand upon it. They just use one-word replies. Yeah, I agree with that. It's infuriating. Constantly throwing pity parties. Not a dude, but I am bi/pan. So number 1, hard illegal substances. Number 2, cheating. Number 3, putting the toilet paper roll on backwards. Don't tell me there isn't a right way, because there absolutely is. Number 4, saying things like, I'm not like other girls, or girls just don't like me for some reason. I get along better with guys.
Crystals and horoscopes.
I think I've actually seen too many people poo-poo on like astrology or tarot. Like, I don't put much stock in it. I know how to read a tarot and stuff like that. It's just a fun thing to do. I think people probably think that the people who actually like that stuff take it more seriously than they actually do. And if they do take it that seriously, then yeah, I kind of get being a bit annoyed by it.
Breathing with their mouth open.
Ghetto talk / slang. I was dating this girl for a while until one date while we were driving back from the restaurant, she opened a chocolate bar and threw the paper through the window.
Getting hit with a frying pan.
That one does indeed suck.
Herpes.
When they act like they're doing you a favor by letting you have sex with them.
When she pees on your floor and vomits in your bed.
Being with a chick that was a 10 when I was 19 only lasted 6 months because she always told me to open up to her and be emotional. Then when I went through some hard times and finally opened up and she started making fun of me and calling me a lady's nether regions and whatnot. Knew she was mentally unstable from then on. Once we broke up, she did the old I tried to self-delete myself because I can't live without you. Psychopath. Too much makeup and wearing revealing clothes all the time. I want a girl who is proud of their natural beauty. Fake trendy accent. I still get accused of that every once in a blue moon. No sense of humor.
Burps and farts.
Bare feet on car dashboard. I imagine this person did not enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Nonetheless, I agree.
Doctors of Reddit, what's your most surprising, I can't believe I'm having this conversation with an adult story? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and patient was in the back. Patient was fine. Patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently saw a golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time.
So, when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right?
No. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. Where did this guy hear that? I've never heard that before. Well, it looks like she's about 30 days pregnant. Congrats! How can she be pregnant? She's only around her brother. Well, they actually don't follow the same moral code as you or I. I'm a veterinarian, by the way. Thank you for the clarification there. Not a doctor yet, but I'm an ER tech. For about 2 years now, mom comes in with her baby plus 2 more older kids. Complains that the baby hasn't pooped in a while and won't stop crying. As I'm settling them in with one of the nurses, the baby is bawling. Like opera singer lungs bawling. Suddenly, mom whips out a white plastic shopping bag and sticks an end in the kid's mouth and says, "This is the only way she stops crying." Nurse and I share a look and immediately order an emergency x-ray on the kid's stomach. Turns out she had ingested a good amount of these bags and it was blocking up in her stomach. Big deal. Potentially life-threatening. When we confront the mom about her baby feeding habits, her only words of defense are, "Well, I checked all over the bag and I couldn't find anything on it that said non-edible." This woman's a potential danger to her kids. She has 2 older kids, meaning she was probably doing this with them too before. I told a patient that the 30 plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the reason of his chief complaints of anxiety and insomnia. He said he wasn't willing to give this up or try decaf. That's an insane amount of caffeine intake. Like, that's not healthy for multiple reasons. When I was an internal medicine resident, I came across a very nice 50-year-old Dominican lady. She was well-mannered, but one could tell she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. As I was prepping her chart for our first visit, I noticed that she'd been seen by every single digestive disease MD in our hospital system. Not only that, she'd had every single procedure in the book, ranging from endoscopies up both holes and culminating in an exploratory laparotomy. You're opened up to basically look inside you when we have no clue what's going on. All of this because for years she'd had one single complaint. She reported severe gnawing pain in her stomach. At this point I should mention that she was Spanish speaking only. Not only that, she had a very heavy Dominican accent, and I was the first Hispanic doctor to ever see her. My first language is Spanish, and even I had difficulty understanding her. So she comes in, and after exchanging some first-time pleasantries, I politely ask her how she's doing. Sure enough, although she was smiling and said she felt well, she pointed at her belly and said it was biting again and asked for the cream to kill it. At this point, I got intrigued. Her medication list only mentioned a cream used for herpes breakouts. The previous fellow only mentioned in his notes that in every single visit she only asked for the cream and nothing else. When I asked what she meant by the biting and what she intended to do with the cream, she very calmly tells me she intends to stick the cream up her butt in order to kill the bird living inside her. After delving more deeply into her story, it turns out she didn't have a medical condition. Ever since she was a little girl, she believed that after eating a whole quail egg, the bird had spawned inside her and gnawed away at her insides whenever she was hungry. After a short visit to psych, she was diagnosed with a somatic type delusional disorder. No amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure her, but she was still a fully functional mother of two who paid her taxes and had 2 part-time jobs. I reached out to every digestive disease doctor in our hospital system once more to make sure she never receives an inappropriate invasive intervention. I've been following her for 3 years now, and she's as happy as one can be, considering she has a bird living inside her. Why wasn't a translator brought in long before? Why did it take her going through every single doctor and a range of surgeries to finally find someone who spoke Spanish? While in dental school, my friend pulled out several bombed-out teeth on an adult male. After the procedure was finished and post-op instructions were given, the man asked, "So when should I expect my new teeth to grow in?" He was serious. My significant other is a med student. He helped to diagnose a 40-year-old woman who finally sought out a doctor after having open, festering wounds on her entire torso for over a year. The open wounds only appeared after more than a year of painful, visible lumps on her breasts. She had never sought treatment prior to this. My significant other had to inform her that her entire body was riddled with cancer, that there was no treatment to help her, and that she would be dead very soon. Her sister, who was there the entire time, began loudly proclaiming what a shame it was that nothing could ever have been done, and that hopefully someday we would be able to detect cancer sooner. My significant other watched the doctor explain that pretty much any other woman in the country would have gotten effective treatment at the first sign of the lumps. This was during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Guys, if something's wrong, just get checked. Don't put it off for a year. You never know what you're dealing with. Better safe than sorry. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. It's the left side. The left. I saw a patient who was concerned that she was still lactating, despite the fact that she had stopped breastfeeding her twins 2 years ago. She said, "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find my husband sucking on them. He says he's trying to drain the milk for me." I had to explain to her that breastfeeding her husband will lead to continued lactation. Okay, this one's just creepy. Medical assistant to a cataract surgeon here. If you sleep with your contact lenses in long enough, they will fuse to your eyes and you'll need to go to surgery to have them removed. Yes, you can go blind from this. For the love of God, don't sleep with your contact lenses in. Thank you for the PSA and horrifying imagery. Got placed during a rotation in the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area in Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand that she was carrying as a soldier would a rifle. I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped. I mean, I guess that's one way to use it. I'm a pharmacist, but the comment still relates. Had a lady call in complaining that her husband's Viagra wasn't working. I then went on to explain to the patient's wife that in order for the medication to work, the patient needed some sort of stimulation. The lady just screamed aloud, "Me?" and then hung up the phone. Still my favorite Viagra story. The fact that you have multiple Viagra stories to choose from makes me want to sit down and have a conversation. My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small town's doctor office. She had a 70-ish-year-old woman come in with complaints of a small but painless growth that was visible at the back of her throat. Turns out, it took her 70 years to notice her uvula. Yeah, that's been there the whole time. Client brings in her dog for a tick she tried to burn off. Looking, I see it's a nipple and tell her this. She says, "But he's a boy, how can he have nipples?" I say, "Ma'am, your husband has nipples." Blank stare, then light bulb moment for her. Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come in for eye examinations because when I take my glasses off, things are blurry. Often, these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to the clinic. Patient comes into ER, 19-year-old male. I'm getting his history. "Why are you here today?" "Every morning I wake up and my stomach hurts." "How long has it been hurting?" "All my life." "Well, what's different today that made you come here?" "My girlfriend doesn't think it's normal." More questions. Exam by ER physician, followed by lab tests. The abdominal pain always goes away after he eats. Always. He wakes up hungry. He thinks it's pain. I don't know what to say to this one. Just eat food? During residency in an urban northeastern USA city, I was in a clinic. A very pleasant 50-something lady came in for a physical. Everything was going fine when she casually asks if there's any new vaccines out. She was up to date with everything, so I asked if she had any specific concerns. She was casually asking to see if she could vaccinate her gay adult son against homosexuality. Very nice, always had a smile on her face, even when I broke the news to her. My mom was the head nurse at a clinic here in Houston in the 80s. She worked for an old World War II doctor that had gone into private practice as an old-school general practitioner when he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain in her pelvic area. My mom also tells me that there was a stench coming from the woman's lap that could only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the patient, who told her that her and her boyfriend had been sexually active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may have contracted an STD and asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her. The doctor arrives and closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later, mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was a discharge and began to question the patient about her sex life. Was it protected, not protected, things like that. According to my mom, the patient told her, "No doc, we always use a rubber." The doctor looked down, then noticed there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's private area. The doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out. What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the talk with the woman about sex education, and that rubber bands were not a successful contraceptive, and not what they meant by wearing a rubber. That is just horrible in so many ways. Not a doctor, but a dental hygienist. I had to explain that brushing your teeth with Comet, the cleaner, was not a good way to clean your teeth to a 40-year-old woman. I also had to tell a woman that was painting her teeth with white fingernail polish that was a bad idea. A 32-year-old grown man asked me if the hot spells he was experiencing at night meant he was going through menopause. My mother helps the Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures. When asked why she thought so, she replied, "Well, I've lost weight, and you know that when you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first." Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can truly use your help. I could write a book about the things I've seen. Why would you think it would be the gums? It's just such a weird and random place. I was a newly minted graduate with fresh and optimistic views on my life as a doctor. Second week in came this old lady and her very dysfunctional family. They would argue and complain about everything, from the food, the nurses they didn't like, and every single medical decision we made. She was very, very sick, so her management was just as complicated. She had several children, and they all didn't like one another and would not talk to one another. Each time, we would have to explain a long update to every single one of them, because
They're entitled to hear it from a doctor.
one of these stories being sitting down and explaining why you don't give Gatorade as an IV drip. They didn't understand why we were giving salt water to her. The conversation with her son went something like this. "Look, she likes Gatorade. She's drinking it, so why can't you give it to her through her drip?" We explain why, and the son frowns. "But it's isotonic." We explain again. "Yes, but Gatorade has more electrolytes." We explain again. "Salt water just seems to be too cheap. Can't you give her something else closer to Gatorade that has electrolytes?" This continues for 2 hours. Wash and repeat every day during her admission. Afterwards, I told my fiance. He opened up a scene from Idiocracy on YouTube, and I just sat there with my mouth open for a while. Yes, you drink Gatorade. You don't inject it directly into the bloodstream. Two very different things. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me with what she described as some funny itching growth on her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD, until she shockingly assured that she was still a virgin. Now, virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more. But apparently that doesn't cover other types of sex, and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. EMT here. I had a grown adult trying to explain to me that someone else pooped his pants. Got called out for finger pain at a homeless shelter at 2 a.m. We get there and the guy jumps in the truck with very mild swelling to the tip of his right index finger. Here's how the conversation went. Me. "So, what happened?" "Yeah, I smoked some stuff and then I fell asleep in my bunk and I woke up next to my bunk and my finger hurt and there was poop." "There was poop? Did you fall in poop?" No, like in my pants." "So, you pooped your pants?" "No, it wasn't me." "So, let me get this straight. You smoked something, took a nap, rolled out of your bed in your sleep, hurt your finger, and someone else came along and pooped in your pants before you woke up?" "That's what I'm saying. It wasn't me." My friend, I think you need to take a step back and analyze the situation here. My brother is a general practitioner in rural Tennessee. Enough said, right? He says most of his patients' visits go something like this. "Well, person, you're pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, and are complaining about joint pain. Have you been exercising and cutting out sugar and carbs?" "Yeah, I have, doc, but it doesn't seem to help. Do you have any better meds you could prescribe?" "Well, let's talk about your diet. How much water do you drink a day?" "I don't like water. As I get extra ice in my sweet tea every day to make sure I get enough water." My brother explains that that's not enough water by a long shot. "How much sweet tea are you drinking every day? Those can have a lot of sugar in them." "Well, I get a large one from Hardee's or McDonald's or wherever on my way to work with my breakfast, and another one on my way home for dinner. Then I have a glass or two when I get home." "Well, that's a lot of sugar, and a lot of fast food if you're eating it twice a day. What do you eat at home?" "I don't like to cook, so I usually don't eat anything except those Little Debbie snack cakes at home. Those have a lot of sugar too." "I thought that all I had to do was cut out Mountain Dew. Now you're saying I can't eat my food or my snacks? What are you suggesting I do? Eat salads for every meal? Why can't you just up my meds?" I relate to this patient's eating habits a little too much, probably. I had to explain to an adult that you have to brush all the sides of your teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Patient comes in at 2 a.m. for insomnia, clearly tweaking her brains out. Heart rate at 200. Can't sit still, bouncing off the walls. I suggest maybe easing up on the snow. But doctor, I love the snow. I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. I looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me, and saw he'd been seen a few times with knee pains and shoulder pains and the like. The guy is in his 70s, so probably just arthritis. I'm thinking I'll do an examination of his sore joints and ask a few questions, prescribe some painkillers, and it'll be a quick one. I call him in and he walks in and sits down and is cheery as anything. What seems to be the problem then, sir? I notice you've had some issues recently with sore joints, I ask him. He then proceeds to tell me about his sore knee. So I check his knee and take a history and it all seems fine. I ask if there's anything else, and he remembers actually his neck is sore too. So I check his neck and nothing untoward to be found there either. At this point, he's like, okay, well, thanks, doc, I'll be off then. I say to him, oh, good, glad we could help. And you have no other pains at all before you go? He then sits back down and tells me he's been having central crushing chest pain radiating down his left arm and into his jaw since last night, and has been feeling breathless, and when it happened, he had an impending sense of doom. I know a lot of you won't be doctors here, but I'm sure you all recognize the signs of a heart attack there. He had all the classic textbook symptoms. I called the ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Sounds like this dude was taking a heart attack like a champ. My dad told me about an extremely religious male patient who was concerned about his nocturnal emissions. He saw it as an offense to God and wanted to know what he could do to stop it. My dad's response? Well, it's gotta go somewhere, my guy. Nurse here, retired after 27 years on the job. The number of American 20-somethings that don't know if they're circumcised or not is surprisingly high. When one with urinary tract infection symptoms needs to be given a specimen for testing, I ask, are you circumcised? If not, I have to tell them to pull back the foreskin before peeing in the cup. The number of guys who have asked, what's that, is way too many. For the record, I can count the number who were uncircumcised on 2 hands. This one's from my cousin, who's a doctor. He was in his first year in a clinic, and people went there to have an appointment because he was good looking. Elderly ladies loved him particularly, but this is totally unrelated. And the worst case was when this elderly lady goes in with her granddaughter, around 8 years old. She had a severely infected wound on her head. Upon close inspection, he saw the wound crawling with small maggots and the smell was terrible. He was very upset, of course, and asked why didn't she wash the wound and bring her earlier. She said she thought it would heal with time and was afraid to wash it, lest water enters her brain and kills her. There was also a woman that took her 6-year-old daughter there to check why she still didn't have pubes. You know, old folks are supposed to be wise, but when it comes to medicinal stuff, a lot of the times they're very much behind the curve. What's the most WTF thing you've experienced or seen during a flight? I travel quite a bit and have seen a few weird things, but on a recent trip from Vienna to Venice, things were taken to a whole new level. So we're about 20 minutes into the flight when I noticed that a woman sitting across from me had a Persian cat in one of those cat carrier bags. The plane was really warm and the cat was sitting in the bag panting. Well, the lady decided to let the cat out of the bag to let it cool off a bit. After trying to shove the cat's face up into the air vents for a minute, the cat literally freaked out. It was clawing at everything, attaching itself to the seats in front, jumping around, hissing, well, you name it. This thing went crazy. Anyway, after about 5 minutes of more of the same, the cat completely lost it, tried to climb the seat in front and, wait for it, fell over dead. We couldn't believe what had just happened. The owner was trying to shake the cat around a bit to wake it up, but it was a goner. For the duration of the flight, she was sat there holding her dead cat, sobbing quite profusely. That's just awful. I would be completely paranoid bringing a pet on a plane, and not because of anything like this happening, just in general. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine, I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank masks over her mouth. Apparently, they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? Hey, you're literally out there helping save lives in your sleep. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s, and a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. Yeah, talk about different times. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight, I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay, but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. Apparently, chocolate's very valuable in the air. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back, with my younger brother, and the lady that occupied the third seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight, and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed poop. To this day, I have no idea how you respond to something like that. Not really a WTF moment, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome, blah blah blah. So we're just leaving Cleveland, we should be in, And then slightly under his breath, but not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says, "Where the hell are we going?" Long pause. "Chicago." Everyone laughed. Good times and high times. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. How are you going to ask me to invest if you're not even going to tell me what I'm investing in? Come on, buddy. I was flying to Denver on Delta in winter 2009, and they were switching from cash to credit only. They just got their brand new machines to swipe cards, and I was one of the first people to test them out. I ordered a 7 and 7, and it was $7. She took my card, swiped it, and the thing that printed out was $0. I left a $3 tip and thought, cool. About 10 minutes later, she came by and asked if I wanted another. I said, sure, why not? I swiped the card, and another $0 transaction. Bought lunch, $0. So I ordered 4 more 7 and 7s and got hammered for around $20 in tips. I checked my bank account the day after and sure enough, only the tip showed up. I have no idea what happened, but that was one happy flight attendant. Sounds like you did pretty well for yourself too, my friend. A guy died next to me once. On a flight from Maui to Dallas, I was half asleep in the second to last row of the plane. While I was listening to music and dozing, I suddenly heard a really loud, hard thud next to me. I look over and there's a man lying on the ground, completely still. I thought maybe he tripped, but the flight attendant came running and he was unresponsive. She frantically ran up and down the aisles asking for doctors. Luckily for him, the flight was full of vacationing doctors and nurses. All of them in ridiculous clothes. 2 of the doctors who came back were in Hawaiian shirts and golf attire, and the female nurse who came back was wearing a very strappy, revealing blue Hawaiian print dress. The doctors tried to wake the man up, but he was gone. I was surprised to find out just how much medical equipment they have on commercial flights. The docs whipped out a portable defibrillator and shocked the guy, then set up an IV drip for him. I never heard a word out of him or saw him move. Not sure if he actually woke up or not. Our flight was diverted to LA, and when we landed, half a dozen EMT personnel ran onto the plane to pull the guy out on a gurney. Unfortunately for me, this scenario set off a panic attack, and I had to go find a nice spot in the aisle to lie down so that I didn't pass out and cause more problems for the crew and doctors. It was kind of embarrassing. One time, I was the only person on a very big plane from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then, I've used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get some action from his wife in the seat in front of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline, a passenger sitting next to her pulls out his thing and starts peeing into a bottle, then hands it to the stewardess who didn't even bat an eye. I'm sorry, is there no bathroom on the plane? I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin, Texas. About an hour into the flight, I noticed this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn towards the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she's led to the bathroom. As she's leaving her seat, she poops herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this poop and vomit aroma assaults my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it up as best as they could, but it made no real improvement. Ugh, that's awful to have to sit through, but also just kind of feel bad for that lady. She's obviously having a really rough time. While waiting to use the bathroom on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet, pleasuring himself. At first, I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As his head turned to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point, my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight, and even the next day. Ever since that time, I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when, about halfway through the flight, a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and addresses the situation like a boss. It was Dr. Oz. Oh, great. Is there any other doctor on board? On the way to Japan, I look across the aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a large stash of adult magazines and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. I'm sure he says he just reads them for the articles. I was flying Calgary to Houston, which is about a 4-hour direct flight. We were just about 2 hours into the flight, or coincidentally, just about to Denver, when the pilot announced we would have to turn back to Calgary. So around we go and land in about an hour 15. He really cranked it. We touch down and taxi over to the mechanics. They open the cargo door and shut it again. And in 15 more minutes, we were fueled up and in the air and off to Houston. This time it was about a 3-hour flight, full thrust the whole way. Luckily, there was an industry guy behind me and I overheard him speculating the reason. His idea was that since the airline had paid mechanics in Calgary and probably not in Denver, it would be cheaper for them to turn all the way around to Calgary than pay all the costs associated with landing in Denver. Luckily, it was just a little glitch and not a true problem, but it was anyone's guess the true issue. I have a friend that's familiar with the inner workings of the plane, and he said that anytime they open the cargo door and unplug a certain cable during maintenance, some switch has to be flipped to reset the alarm system for that door. He said it's an extremely common mistake for that switch to not get flipped after work has been done, and it results in false alarms. All that cost, likely in the tens of thousands, because one guy forgot to flip a switch. I'd be more annoyed at the waste of time, honestly. Just land in Denver, come on. On a flight a few weeks ago, the flight attendant started to make preparations for landing, telling people to put their trays up and whatnot. I noticed the flight attendant loudly speaking to a man in his late 20s or early 30s sitting 2 rows in front of me. "Sir, you need to put your seat back up. Sir, sir." The guy starts spitting blood and convulsing. It sounded like he was choking on the blood with each gasp of air. The flight attendant starts screaming for help and they make an announcement over the PA for a doctor. 4 passengers and all flight attendants leap into action. Turns out, the lady in the row between me and the sick man is a nurse. Together, they get him laid out in the row with his head in the aisle. He's not responding to their questions and he's fading in and out of consciousness. We make an emergency landing, 20 minutes ahead of schedule. As we're taxiing, he regains consciousness and tells the flight attendant holding his head that he's sorry for the trouble. We land, paramedics meet the plane and carry him off. He seemed to be stable, but I hope everything worked out for the guy. Yeah, that's gotta be a really scary moment for everyone around. Spitting blood and convulsing is not something that you want happening on a plane. This one happened to my cousin. He was flying in South America, and about halfway through the flight, he realizes he really needs to go to the bathroom. The plane he's on is a tiny prop plane made for tiny people. He's 6'5". He awkwardly climbs over his aisle mates and stumbles and shuffles to the back of the plane. As he's closing the door, the captain comes on the loudspeaker and warns of upcoming turbulence. He thinks, screw it, I really need to pee. He crams himself into this tiny bathroom and manages to whip it out. And right as he starts to pee, they hit a huge bit of turbulence that knocks him off his feet, backwards, through the bathroom door, and flat on his back in the aisle, still peeing straight up in the air. He was completely mortified and managed to get back up, pick up the door, and work himself back into the bathroom. He waited for like 20 minutes hoping no one would have seen it or that they would have forgotten about it by then, but when he went back out to take his seat, he got a standing ovation from every single person on the plane. Ouch. I feel like this story might be a little bit embellished, but I like the visuals here. I used to travel internationally a lot when I was younger and working for a telecom company designing new infrastructure. On one of the trips as we were heading to China, I looked out the window. We were above Alaska and bearing straight somewhere, and the horizon had a huge slice of black, like some weird wedge-shaped cloud that encompassed half the horizon. It was a bright day on the ground or sea below us. The ice was very bright and white, but there was this giant dark wedge encompassing and seeming to take over the earth as you looked out to the horizon. I had the guys next to me take a look out as well, and they were confused at first too. I was really confused for a few minutes. Then I realized what I was looking at in profile and what that black engulfing wedge really was. It was night. We were flying in such a manner that we were surfing the edge of daytime and nighttime at 35,000 feet. And at that moment, if you looked out over the horizon, you saw daytime fading into night. I only saw it that once. It was being in the right place at the right time. Aside from bad in-flight movies, that would be my most WTF experience. That sounds like that would be absolutely incredible to see. I'd love to see photos of something like that. I'm sure you could find it on Google. The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines. I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down, and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this, the pilot announces to the rest of the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we're now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. I mean, yeah, you would want that to be the end of the events. You don't want that happening in the air. I was on a flight home from South Africa after a family vacation. My dad is diabetic, but he usually keeps his blood sugar levels pretty regulated, so I never worried before. Mid-flight, I wake up from a nap and see him slumped over the side of his seat. He was taken to the back of the plane where 3 doctors were examining him. They said his heartbeat went up to 220 or something, which I think means he was about an inch from death. All I remember is seeing my mom and brother break down. I began having flashes of life without my father, and it overwhelmed me. I felt sick to my stomach, imagining what life would be like, when all of a sudden his heart rate stabilized. The doctors on board said that it was a miracle, and I felt so much relief. The plane had to stop in Senegal where my dad was transferred to a hospital. He wanted me to keep going since the semester was starting soon. That flight home alone was terrible. I felt the other passengers watching me the entire time. He's all right now, but every time I get on a plane, I remember that feeling of leaving the whole world behind. I was on a flight from Amsterdam to New York one time, and there was this kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, a stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshment cart into the aisle right in front of him, and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run down the aisle like that," or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Hey, you know what? Someone had to. I went to Vegas with my wife. First, let me say it was an early flight. We got there extra early for check-in, put our bags to the side so as not to get in anyone's way. This 300+ pound greaseball wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts comes waddling in with one carry-on bag, remember this as it's important, and knocks over my neatly stacked out-of-the-way baggage. It's also 15 degrees outside, freezing, and 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, whatever, no big deal. Later, we get on the plane. My wife has the window, I'm in the middle, and here comes too fat for the seat Hawaiian guy with his little bag to sit on the end next to me. Great. Believe me when I tell you, this guy smelled like a dead animal covered in throw up and poop. I literally dry heaved when he sat down next to me. The guy had a carry-on bag that he was clenching like it contained something of the utmost importance. Obviously not deodorant. And he was sweating through his thin red flowered shirt while everyone else was bundled in heavy winter jackets. We hadn't even taken off yet and I was becoming violently ill smelling this guy. I had to stuff my face in my sweater and throw my head into my wife's lap to try and escape the smell. After an hour, the guy became increasingly fidgety and paranoid. This made him sweat more. I can't figure out how a guy who sweated so much was so fat. He was like a walking sauna of used banana hammocks. Finally, the guy got up to use the bathroom, and as soon as he closed the bathroom door, people began ripping cologne and perfume ads out of magazines and rubbing them on his sweat-soaked chair. I kid you not. People were offering their apologies to me for having to sit next to him. And then the stewardess comes over and says, "I'm sorry, the flight is booked. There's nowhere else to put him." And I'm staring at her like, what? I never even said anything to anyone about it. That's when I realized this guy was such a disgusting mess. People were actually rallying around trying to help me. It was the weirdest moment of my life. For the next 5 hours, he made about 20 more trips to the bathroom, and each time, different rows would come over to rub his seat down with cologne. Oh, and guess what was in the bag? Adult magazines. Piles of adult magazines. He took a new one to the bathroom with him each time. I haven't been on a plane since. Yeah, that's gotta be just about the worst person you'd have to sit next to on an airplane. I was on a flight to Chicago. We were supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing, they told us it was too icy and we were diverted to Midway. The two are about 26 miles apart. So we land at Midway, we disembark, and as we're leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take us to O'Hare. We all said, screw it, we'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So about 5 of us out of a full flight of 90 got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane, then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. From the flyer's point of view, this just seems like a complete waste of time. I get that they must need the plane at that airport for something, but come on. Everyone's already deboarded, you got a few people left, just roll with it. The die has been cast. Not my story, but my sister's. She was once on a long-haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night, while everyone was sleeping, suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this wasn't long after 9/11, everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. Hey, come on, it's not her fault. She has no control over that. I get that you guys would be annoyed, but come on, give her a break. Redditors who have caught their significant other cheating, how did you catch them? Did you give them another chance? We went to a Halloween party at a friend's place. I'd known she's had a bit of a crush on one guy who was to attend. At one point late in the night, she was quite drunk. She lined up at the washroom immediately after he went in. I kept a bit of an eye on her, and when the bathroom door opened, she went in, but he didn't come out. I stood at the door and waited. When it opened and he stumbled out, I immediately went in and confronted her about it. I'm proud of myself for not committing murder that night. We're going through divorce now. 10 years married with 2 kids. Really? You're gonna do it at a mutual friend's party in the bathroom? That's just got bad idea written all over it. I didn't catch him. He called me the next morning crying and told me everything. I respected his honesty, recognized his remorse, and truly believed it would never happen again. So I decided to forgive him. But after he cheated, he became incredibly paranoid. He started checking my phone, accusing me of revenge screwing people behind his back. Even got mad when I was assigned to work with a man on a group project in school. I couldn't stand by the fact that he was the one who cheated and I was the one being punished. I really had forgiven him. I wasn't holding his mistake over his head, and my attitude toward him didn't change after the fact at all, but he was driving me away more and more every day. After about a month of this, I broke up with him and he completely lost it. Sounds like this was a hitch in the relationship that you guys just weren't going to get through, one way or the other. I met my future husband when I was 15 years old. By the time I was 20, we were married, and I was pregnant with my first child. At 22, I gave birth to our second child, and that's when things changed. Suddenly, he was never home. He would leave the house to pick up milk and return at 5 a.m. He was drinking so heavily that most mornings he'd wake up in a panic, wondering where he'd left his car, only to find it in the driveway. Luckily, he'd never killed anyone driving home while blackout drunk. My husband had wanted to be a writer, so I would constantly find half-written stories or story outlines in these hardcover journals. He left them everywhere, and I'd pick them up and pile them on his desk. One night, I'm getting ready to host a party for my father's 50th birthday. The hall was already booked and I had already decorated. We were expecting about 80 guests. I was quickly trying to get ready and out the door as I had to be there before guests started arriving, but I could not find my pantyhose anywhere. While rummaging through our dresser drawers, I found them, along with another one of his hardcover journals. I opened it up and scanned a page wondering why this particular book was stashed in a drawer. As I read what was on the pages, my entire world was crashing down on me. Not only was my husband an alcoholic, he also had a pretty serious drug addiction. Then the worst part hit me. He was having an affair with my best friend. She was my maid of honor, my best friend since we were 10 years old. I ran to the washroom and threw up. I just couldn't handle the information I'd just gotten. I quickly finished getting ready and left the house. I hosted that party that night with both my husband and my best friend in attendance, and did so with a smile on my face. It was a tough night, but I survived. We've since gotten divorced, and I no longer have contact with either of them. Yeah, a lot of red flags there, unfortunately. Going out for milk and not coming back till 5 a.m.? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need some answers. And the worst part is, he was cheating with your best friend. He was my first proper boyfriend, and in hindsight, he was a pretty crappy boyfriend. But at the time, I thought the sun shone out of his butt. So I was crushed when out of the blue, he dumped me, with no reason. A week later, a group of his friends who'd taken a liking to me contacted me with the real reason for our breakup, because apparently they'd seen what was happening and they were sick of his crap. Basically, he'd been seeing another girl behind my back, and when she found out about me, she refused to sleep with him. So he dumped me in the hopes of getting into her pants. She inevitably told him to get lost, at which point he tried getting back with me. I did not take him back. I found out while I was deployed. The guy she was cheating on me with emailed me and told me everything, every detail. He apologized and told me he had no idea we were together. I put a hole in the wall, went to smoke an entire pack at the smoke pit, went back to my laptop, and I thanked the guy. You gotta at least respect the guy for coming to you and letting you know. If he honestly didn't know she was with someone, at least he's doing what he can to try and make it right. My girlfriend was out with a friend, we'll call her Susan, on a girls' night until all hours, and told me she was staying at Susan's place for the night. The next time I see Susan, she pulled me aside and told me that they actually went to the house of a guy my girlfriend worked with. We'll call him Patrick, because that's his name. Susan goes on to tell me that she woke up in the middle of the night and found my girlfriend fooling around with Patrick on the couch, while Patrick's girlfriend was asleep in the bedroom. I thanked her for letting me know, then went home and told my girlfriend to pack her stuff. I kinda hope someone told Patrick's girlfriend too. The whole situation is messed up, but she was in the house. My ex-wife and I were together for 6 years, married for 2.5 of them. She worked in a hospital and started getting a little too buddy-buddy with a doctor. I confronted her about it and she assured me he was just a friend. and tried to make me sound crazy. She even had this idea in that she could convince or trick me into being friends with him so that she could be with him without me being suspicious. I did everything I could to get her to talk to me, but she never would. It's a very long, sad, and messed up tale. Eventually, all her lies started making less and less sense. I found a program that would decipher text messages and picture messages from an iTunes backup of her phone. It had all the evidence I needed. I still can't shake all the texts, images, and general disrespect of our marriage and family that I discovered. We have a 2-year-old together after all. This was a little over a year ago, and I still have serious bouts of depression over it. The day I found out, I texted the picture he had sent of his junk to both him and her. She came home sobbing and trying her best to convince me to try our marriage again. I could never trust her again, nor did I want to try, but for a while, I thought that maybe I should give it a chance. That was a waste of a couple months of my life. She refused to change jobs or stop contacting him, even with the threat of losing her family looming over her head. I made the hardest decision of my life, that it would be better for my daughter to grow up in 2 separate homes where she didn't need to witness her parents constantly fighting her in tears. I share 50-50 custody of her with my ex-wife, which saddens me deeply because I can't see her as much as I want, but it's better than her growing up in a household full of lies and deceit. Throughout the ordeal, I lost 30 pounds from constant stress and depression. I learned that people don't change. Selfish people will always be selfish people. I did, however, receive the amazing gift of a child from it all though, and I would never change that. That's really rough to hear, my friend. That's probably the worst part, is that when that trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. And it sounds like your wife wasn't really putting in any work to get there either. I was deployed in Iraq and my wife was being distant for a few weeks. During my deployment, she mentioned several times in phone calls this contractor she was working with and how much they click and all. I trusted her and never thought that she was cheating, but I joked about it and we laughed it off. I even met the guy while home on leave and he shook my hand, thanking me for my service. A month later, I'm back in Iraq, and one particular night I can't get a hold of her. I called and no answer. I'm very much a trust my gut type of guy, and I had a sinking, sickly feeling of something being up. I never was one of checking or sneaking into her accounts, but we shared passwords with each other. I decided to check her Facebook account. There was nothing in her inbox, but there was one lonely message in her outbox she didn't delete to the contractor guy she worked with, saying, "I will always love you." That was when my world came crashing down. Shortly afterwards, she finally calls me back, not knowing I know, and confesses she's pregnant with his baby. I couldn't get a hold of her because she was with her mom confessing what she had done. That night, I remember punching a wall and straining or broke my thumb, and leaving my barracks knocking over a porta potty. Thankfully, nobody was in it. There was a month or two before I was to be home, and we tried working it out being distant. Once I got home, I decided to give it another chance. She told me she would stop talking to him and request him to be removed from her project. I met her at the office one day for lunch, and she wasn't in her office yet. While waiting for her, I saw she had her email pulled up, but not her usual email. Turns out she had a secret email account with him. After that, I was done and out. The one thing some people don't know is that there can be layers to unravel when your significant other is cheating. My doubts started when I took my significant other's phone on accident, unlocked it, and bam, texts that were pretty inappropriate. I confronted her about it and she tried to talk her way out of it, but they were just texts, so I told her to stop doing it and everything would be fine. Unfortunately, I found out in a pretty annoying way. I was chilling at home and I get a message from a really good friend if I wanted to go play laser tag. We're in college and it's what bored college kids do. I decline and just go about my evening. The next day, I'm talking to that exact friend and he lets me know that my significant other and this other guy, the guy that she was sending the text to and that everyone else also knew, were being a little bit too close. I confronted her and bingo, she was cheating on me. Ended soon after that. A surprise visit from out of town. She's not home. Well, it was a surprise and I wasn't sure of her plans for the evening. So I go to my mom's house to wait a while. A few hours later, I go back to my girlfriend's apartment, but she's still not there. On a hunch, I drive by her male friend's place and sure enough, her car is there. I get an uncomfortable feeling about it, but try not to worry. So I go back to my mom's place to get some sleep. Up early, I go over to my girlfriend's again. Not there. Drive around the block, and she's still at that dude's place. I never liked that jerk. At this point, I'm angry. I go back to my mom's and call my girlfriend's home phone. The message was something like this. I came into town last night and we need to talk. A few hours later, she rings the doorbell and we go upstairs. She confesses that she cheated. I was in love with this woman, so I accepted her apology and gave her another chance. We stayed together for a few months, but I came to realize I couldn't forgive her so easily, especially since she was still hanging around that guy. So we broke up. The end. When they're caught and they're not willing to cut off contact with the person that they were caught with, there's definitely going to be problems. They can't seriously expect you to sit there and just be okay with you continuing to spend time with them. I'd been dating a guy for a few months. We didn't have a title on it, but a couple months before the incident, we had decided that we had no interest in seeing others and we were exclusive. He decides he wants to buy an iPad, and a few days later, I asked if I could see it to see what apps he had, and if there were any I might like to put on my own. I noticed an app called MeetMe that has around 5 or 6 notifications on it. I honestly had no idea what it was, so I opened it. It went straight to his inbox, which was full of messages from other women. Just as I saw that, he asked if I was ready to go to the grocery store, so I left it there. He could tell something was up at the grocery store, but I didn't bring it up in public, obviously. We get back to his place and I open up the app again. I said, "What's this app on here called MeetMe? I've never heard of that before." He said,
Oh, it's just a social networking site, kind of like Facebook. It's really big with my friends from up in Oregon.
So I open up a message that says something like, "Hey girl, you want to come see me so I can play with those tatas?" Or something along those lines. I said, "Oh, so this blonde girl Shelly is gonna fly all the way from Oregon so you can play with her tatas? How sweet of her." Then we get into a huge fight, with him mostly claiming that I'm not his girlfriend so he can still do things with other girls, seemingly forgetting about the exclusivity talk. It ends with him confessing that he did it because he's in love with me and those strong feelings scared him, so he turned to other women, but he never actually met up with any of them. He also cried, so that was cool. I gave him another chance, but we crashed and burned not too long afterwards because I just couldn't trust that sketchy jerk. That's one of the worst, most popular excuses for cheating I've ever heard. It's just stupid when you think about it. The fact that people think that this is a legitimate excuse just shows how stupid they are. My ex just started grad school after being out of undergrad for about 2 years. We'd been going out for nearly a year. She would introduce me to a lot of her classmates and stuff, and we'd start to hang out with some of them. The people she had made the best friends with were guys, which I didn't have too much of a problem with. Most of them seemed cool. One of the guys she was probably the closest with, and she started talking about this guy all the time. He had just gotten married a couple months prior, I guess. I had met him a few times, and I got just a bit of a jerk vibe from him, but whatever. A couple weeks go by and she just starts to act different. It's our anniversary weekend and I have dinner plans for us. Get a nice card, all that kind of stuff. She has to cancel on me at the last minute because she has to study. That weekend, I stay at her apartment because I need to do something downtown the next day, and I wasn't living around there. She ended up having to go to her parents' house for some reason. She left her laptop and I took it to go on Gmail. Her Gmail was logged in, and I know I really shouldn't have done it, but I started to poke around just a little. I felt terrible while doing it, but I could feel some distance between us and she wouldn't talk to me about whatever it was. She had deleted the majority of her Gchat conversations, but must have overlooked one of them. It was a quite obscene conversation with that married guy about what they had done that weekend and many other times before that. So I took the card I had gotten for her, wrote F you all over the words, telling her how I had loved her, and set it on her computer with that conversation still open, and left. That's it? No follow-up? I guess she just came home and found that and put it all together and decided to let it go? My first boyfriend cheated on me with his ex at least twice, but I didn't actually find out until years after we broke up. He and I got together for drinks and to catch up, and I just flat out asked him if he'd slept with her. He couldn't answer me, and that answer was enough. Looking back, I knew in the back of my mind something was up, and I should have accepted that and moved on sooner. The paintings she did of him, the way he'd disappear for days after seeing her, heck, he even drove to my school in her car to tell me we should take a break. Ugh. It makes me angry to think about how naive I was. I was trying to be the cool girlfriend who didn't mind her boyfriend hanging out with his ex because they were just friends. Joke's on me, I guess. My ex-boyfriend and I had been dating for 2 years when he cheated on me. It was his birthday and we were supposed to be going out for dinner that night. I decided to surprise him with his birthday present earlier that day. I went over to his house since he was off from work and saw that he had left the door unlocked. So I went in and called out for him, but he didn't answer. His TV volume was turned up really loud, so I went up to his room just to catch him pile driving my cheer captain. There was no confrontation. I left quietly, though I did come back to stick nails in his tires out of spite. He begged me to forgive him, but I declined. I won't lie, I was tempted, but it really hurt. To give him everything, and I mean everything I could emotionally, and he was my first, for him to turn around and betray me like that really hurt. I will say that holding grudges did me no good. I was able to forgive him just for closure purposes. When it comes to forgiving someone for something like this, that's more what it's for. It's for you. You need to be able to move on, and it's hard to do that when you're still holding on to those feelings. My roommates in college confronted her after they knew she had someone over while I was out of town. She convinced them that she would tell me what had happened. After I returned and 24 hours passed, my roommates told me because they let her have her time. I kicked her out immediately and ended it. About a month later, she moved into the same building, same floor across the hall. Her door was about 8 feet from mine. It's a college town with tens of thousands of apartments. And no, it was not to see me. We talked once after the breakup, and it was truly over. That's incredibly awkward to have to be across the hall from each other after all of that. My wife had been acting distant for a few weeks, and suddenly started meeting a female friend of hers a night a week or so. I was suspicious, especially when the friend called looking for her on a night that they were supposed to be out together. A few nights later, I found some pictures and text messages on her phone. We argued, and I ended up going to my buddy's house at 3 in the morning. God bless him. The next day, we argued some more, and of course it was my fault. After all, I didn't pay her enough attention. We went to counseling, and I stayed because of our kids, but I've never forgiven her, and honestly, I wonder if staying was a mistake. The marriage was rocky once he met a girl in his summer session course and was studying with her while I was gone at work. Sometimes she'd come early in the morning, like 6 a.m., and then be there when I got home at 9 p.m. He would make her breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the groceries I was buying for us with my hard-earned money. I put my foot down and said that he had to limit his time with her, that my needs weren't being met. He was withholding sex for weeks at the time, citing that he was too tired or stressed. He said I was overreacting, that nothing was happening between them, and that I was just trying to sabotage his career goals. I read his chats with her, and he was pouring his heart out about our troubles, but there was no evidence of cheating. I sent him to sleep on the futon the day I came home from work to have lunch and found them boxing in the backyard shirtless. In the following months, I tolerated none of his crap. But what really got me was when I happened upon a pros and cons list comparing me to his ex, his study buddy, and some other girl I hadn't even heard of yet. I also found love letter drafts to 2 girls thrown in the trash, not even hidden. Needless to say, I ended it right quick and kicked him out. I was actually pretty merciful and let him live in the garage for 3 weeks, but he definitely didn't deserve it. Last I heard, he's dating the 3rd girl on the list and living with his study buddy. Jerk. This sounds like it has nothing to do with you and more with him just not knowing what he wants. Sadly, a lot of the times that's the way it goes. It's not the person who got cheated on that has anything wrong with them. It's the person who did the cheating. What's the worst thing you've had or seen done by someone who was supposed to be a professional? Dentists will appreciate this one. My girlfriend at the time was unhappy with the appearance of her teeth, and rather than go with orthodontics, which my very professional dentist had recommended, opted to go the instant solution of crowns and veneers. nearly a dozen in all, suggested by a dentist at some random strip mall. Doing this work required she get 6 root canals. Her appointment for the work was a Friday at about 2 p.m. They worked on her for 3 hours, and when it was 5 p.m., it was quitting time. They stopped work, put a temporary bridge on her, and said they'd see her in 2 weeks, when her next appointment was scheduled, and sent her home. Once the lidocaine wore off, she was in agonizing pain. By Sunday, she literally asked me to kill her. Calls to the dentist service went unreturned. Monday morning, she called and was told the pain was normal and they wouldn't see her earlier. That afternoon, I called my dentist, explained the situation, and brought her in immediately. He gave her some lidocaine, which provided instant relief, and then took the temporary bridge off. Next, he said out loud, "Holy crap!" and told his assistant to get the camera and took about 50 pictures. He left and went into his office and then came back, put the temp on, gave her a script for Percocet, and told us to call her dentist again and make an appointment. We did it, and it was scheduled for 7 a.m. the next morning. Apparently, they had started 6 root canals on Friday, but not completed any of them. Just opened the tooth and exposed the nerve, but not actually destroyed it, and left the tooth open with minimal packing and no actual filling. And apparently, they expected my girlfriend to live with that for 2 weeks with no pain meds. I talked to my dentist about it at a later date, and according to him, this was about the single most painful thing a dentist could do to a person. And had they not taken the appointment the next morning, he was going to hand the pics over to the state's ethics review board. That sounds so painful. Thank God you guys were able to get her in to see your dentist quickly. Let this be a fair warning to anyone who's trying to save a buck on their dentist. Had a gynecologist cough straight into my, didn't cover her mouth, didn't turn away, just spread my legs and coughed. My girlfriend's parents saved money on their room addition by hiring a handyman to install the bathroom fixtures instead of a plumber. He mixed up the hot and cold pipes. It's really odd to sit on a toilet full of hot water feeling the steam rise on your butt. I'm sure that's weird at first, but I can see how that would grow on you. I had a teacher in college that took points off my essay for misspelling ludicrous. She didn't know it was a real word and thought I was referring to a pop artist. Had a professor lose my final exam. When I emailed him about why I was failing, he said, "Well, you should have been there for the test." After trying to convince him I was and him not believing me, I showed up to his office and demanded he allow me to go through the Scantrons. He threw a pile at me and rolled his eyes, thinking I was using this as a last resort. Nope. Almost 1,200 Scantrons later, I pulled mine out and put it on his desk. I made him run it through the machine as I watched. Granted, I understand that he had a lot of students and sometimes Scantrons get misplaced, but he shouldn't have been so disbelieving and rude over it. The thing is, I'm sure he has lazy people try and pull moves like this all the time, and probably just didn't want to go through 1,200 Scantrons himself. A doctor once prescribed me beta blockers to treat anxiety. On my follow-up appointment, I asked him about one of the side effects. He asked me what drug I was on. I explained it was the one he had prescribed me the week before, and told him the name of it. The dude proceeds to open a book of prescription drug information and tell me I probably shouldn't be taking it because it could be dangerous. I haven't been back. Maybe look into that kind of thing before prescribing the medication. I had wrecked my mountain bike on a South Mountain trail and ripped open my arm pretty good. I also broke 2 rims, cracked my helmet, and blew out my front shock. I was in and out of consciousness on the road to urgent care. Because it was early Sunday morning, the first 2 places we went to were closed, and we ended up at a little clinic. This young doctor, 3 years out of med school, cleaned my wound, pulled all the rock and dirt out of my skin, and then stitched up a large flap of skin that was torn back. He gave me 2 pain pills and told me to have a good day. Well, apparently you aren't supposed to stitch wounds up like that, and are supposed to let them drain or breathe. I went in 2 days later to get more pain pills because my arm hurt so bad it was keeping me up at night. The doctor on staff told me I had to be admitted to a hospital with an ER immediately, because my whole arm was infected and it was starting to reach my lungs. I had a massive infection that ended up hospitalizing me for days, and then I had to have a surgery where they removed a good part of my forearm tissue to let it all regrow. I spent more than a month packing and cleaning out a dollar-sized wound as my tissue regrew. Worst experience of my life. Unfortunately, there's always someone who graduated at the bottom of the class. Professional roofer didn't seal the roof off properly at the end of the day. It rained that night and my parents' attic was filled with water. I'm from Spain and my parents are from Spain as well. I speak Spanish without any accent, not even a local accent. I speak like people on national TV. I'm white. There's no reason for anyone to think I'm a foreigner. But I have a French first name followed by the two most common Spanish last names. So I had a consultation with a psychologist. She had my medical history before the consultation. The first thing she asked was if I was having a hard time adapting to the country. I told her I'd always lived here, but I had a French name because my mom moved to Switzerland when she was 18 and moved back to Spain to give birth to me, so she was used to French names. So she asked me if my parents were having a hard time adapting to the country. I told her that my parents were Spaniards who had briefly spent time in Switzerland 25 years ago. Then she asked me again if I was finding Spain very different from my home country. At this point, I started getting irritated, but went along with it because I wanted psychiatric treatment, and she was the one who had to refer me. During the 45-minute session, she asked me several times if I was having a hard time adapting, and made numerous references to my status as an immigrant. To this day, I still don't know if she was crazy, on drugs, or just not listening to me. Probably the last option, unfortunately. For a profession that's supposed to be very good listeners, a lot of the times they don't do it so well. A sign language interpreter was working in a classroom. She only had one deaf customer. So instead of doing her work, conveying the message between spoken and sign language, she flirted the entire time with the guy who was sitting next to the deaf student. When I was working for an oil change place, I witnessed the manager of 15 years not put the oil in the car and send it on its way. I was working in the pit at a 2-bay store. While I was changing the diff, fluid on another car, waiting for the oil to drain, the manager did this without checking to see if it was ready. I didn't even get to put the plug back in. What are you doing? It wasn't even ready to put oil in it. The plug is still here. Oh, I thought you were done. You didn't even check if I was done. We found out later that he had just started a new hobby and was fired shortly after. My wife went to a professional conference out of town when she was 7 months pregnant with our first child. It was about a 4-hour drive from home and she was a little concerned. So she asked me to go with her. She didn't consult with her OBGYN. While we were there, her water broke. We went to the local hospital and they said she was going to be bedridden for the next several weeks. So unless we wanted to stay there, we should get in the car and drive like heck back to our hometown. When we got home, we went directly to the hospital and they admitted her. They kept her in a bed with her feet higher than her head and checked her several times a day for infections. Her OBGYN was nowhere to be found. My wife was a registered nurse at the same hospital where she was staying. Her friends, the other nurses, would come by and chat with her frequently. They let her know that the OBGYN was mad at her for leaving town without telling him and complaining to everyone in the hospital about her. After she'd been there for a couple weeks, the OBGYN showed up. I was in the room along with several of her friends. He smelled very strongly of alcohol. He walked up to the bed without saying anything while putting on a glove. He pulled up her gown and jammed his hand in while everyone was standing there. He then made a few incomprehensible sounds and stormed out. We didn't see him again for a couple weeks. The test for infection finally came back positive, so they were going to induce labor. Her OBGYN showed up, and even though the staff doctors said she could deliver normally, her doctor insisted that she needed a C-section. My wife was really disappointed, but we went along with what he said. We later found out he wanted her to have a C-section because he had a tea time that afternoon and didn't want to miss it. I wanted to complain, but he was the head of the department at the hospital and my wife said there would be repercussions to her job if we did. This guy just sounds like the worst. When he's acting like that, who cares what he says anymore? Just do what you think is right. If you want to listen to the other doctors, then do that. When I was a teenager, I ended up having to have my first root canal at a new dentist because my father had switched insurance plans. Everything started out normal, but after about an hour into the procedure, the dentist told me that she needed to step out for a moment. At that moment, I still had one of those metal filing toothpicks stuck up into my tooth, so she told me not to close my mouth. I sat there with it open for over an hour. Apparently, she had gone off to do a procedure on another patient because my root canal had run over the time she had allotted for it. Surprise, surprise, my tooth had somehow become infected in this time, and I had to wear a temporary crown for a week and not eat anything that wasn't room temperature while I took antibiotics. When I finally got the permanent crown, it ended up being the brightest shade of white they had. I still haven't been able to get my other teeth to match it without professional whitening. It should be mentioned that this lovely dentist was Orly Tights, the lawyer dentist who later went on to become the head of the Obama birther movement. I was a little surprised when I ended up seeing her on CNN. An electrician touching exposed wiring to see if it was on. I should also mention that he only had 3 fingers left on that hand. I once saw a professional fire dancer use a fire whip and accidentally set his own hair on fire. He proceeded to flip the heck out. I'm sure that one's just a hazard of the job. One of my history teachers in high school was a complete jerk. He looked like the villain from Air Bud. Red hair, Charlie Brown bulb of hair in the front with a mustache. He had done things like try to rip my papers apart when I stapled the wrong 2 together, ripped one in half and made me tape it back together. I completely hated the guy. One day, he brought his daughter to school and she wasn't acting the way he wanted. He locked her in the closet in the classroom. The entire school heard about it. Sounds like Child Protective Services might need to hear about it too. When I was around 14 or 15, we moved into a new apartment and I made a new friend. She was around my age and we hung out all the time. We would walk to the corner store a lot and she would go in the back room for lengths of time as I waited. I always wondered what she would do in the back room, but she would change the subject and I didn't worry too much since she wouldn't get in trouble and she was the only friend I had at the time, considering it was summer and I had just moved. Later, I saw her coming out with a cop. She didn't know I was in the store. When she saw me, she told me everything and told me not to tell anyone. Story is, she'd been sleeping with this cop for the past 3 months. He worked security at the convenience store part-time. He was an actual police officer. I stayed quiet but couldn't believe how someone that was there to protect us was sleeping with a 14 or 15-year-old in the back of a store. Also, how the owners allowed it and looked the other way. Worst part is he became really good friends with her mom. She never suspected a thing. He used his uniform to earn trust and abuse his power. She said she was in love with him. I stopped hanging out with her so much and we moved a couple months later. I was taking some long-distance courses in order to complete my university degree. One particular class was an economics class. The professor for that semester was filling in for the regular, and had never taught long distance before and was using the regular professor's materials. No big deal, it's really not that hard. So midterms roll around. We write the multiple choice midterm and our proctors mail it back to them. Being as there are people across the country and often in other countries taking the course, the tests take a while to come back and be graded. Cool, no problem. So one day we log into the online courseware and see that our grades are posted, along with a very long and ranty email from the professor. The entire class failed the midterm. She insisted that she double and triple checked the answer key, and that it was right, and that she never had such a thing happen before. She also admonished us for not studying hard enough, and that we really had to work to pass the final. As you can imagine, there was nothing but uproar amongst the class. No one could believe that not even one person passed the midterm. So we waited for the midterms to be returned to us. Along the way, she decided to compromise and offer us a very fair final, doubling all the midterm marks so they were where they should be and to use the better mark between the two for the course grade, as long as the final was passed. Now it's 3 weeks before the final and everyone is flipping out to ensure we completely understand the material. Online study groups were created with questions and discussions abound. Then midterms began arriving back at students' homes. We began posting questions about the answers. Why was X wrong for question A? The professor gave very lengthy and detailed answers for the first few that had been posted. We were confused. The answers that she had given us were to questions that weren't on our midterms. The professor went silent. After berating us for being idiots and insisting it wasn't her fault, the professor profusely apologized for inadvertently correcting all the exams using the answer key for a different version of the exam. Had a locksmith try and fix an atrium door we have in our house. Something in the deadbolt mechanism broke and it refused to retract. This guy came in and couldn't get the lock apart. That is to say, he couldn't figure out how to get the bolts out and tried to get the faceplate off with a pry bar. Then he decided he needed to take the slab out of the opening, except the hinges were tamper-proof. So once the pins were out, he still couldn't get the door out. He tried prying the crap out of the hinges with another larger pry bar, damaging the door in the process. The next day, I was able to get the bolts out and got the door open myself. What the heck, dude? Maybe it was just his first day. Let me just start by saying I've had a peanut and nut allergy since infancy. When I was in preschool, there was a day that they were serving PB&J sandwiches. Me, being the smart little squeaker I was, called attention to the fact that I can't eat PB&J because I'm allergic to peanuts. One of my teachers came over to me, grabbed my sandwich, opened it up, and wiped the side with mostly peanut butter against the edge of a table and put it back together and gave it to me. I gave her a dead, confused, and repulsed stare, followed by a courteous, "Can I have something else, please?" The girl then fetched me broccoli and cheddar soup, and I ate that instead with pride. Later, of course, I told my mother, who rose up all hell. I mean, seriously, what the heck? Not only should my teachers have known about my allergies, but they should have had the sense to know that even the smallest amount of peanut butter will still in fact cause an allergic reaction. I had an electrician who claimed he could do network cabling. Added 3 network points the same way you added power sockets, by running a spur from one existing network point. The result? 4 network points in the office, perfect in every way except that you could only use one at a time. I don't think that's the result you wanted. When I was 6, I was sent to a therapist for ADHD. He decided to give me 11 different medications over the course of a few months. They made me appear to be completely insane. My behavior became strange and violent. My parents eventually made me a day patient at the local asylum because they caught me talking to things that weren't there. Thankfully, the therapist there got me off the cocktail and told my parents to sue the original therapist. I still remember the nightmares and hallucinations that would blend together. Let this be a lesson to always get a second opinion. After some severe bleeding, I went to the ER to see if maybe I'd had a miscarriage. Up till this point, there hadn't been any reason to think I may have been pregnant. The doctor ran a test and came back to tell me, "Congratulations, you're fertile, Myrtle, and yes, it miscarried." When I was a teen, I went to the ER because I had been bit by a cat. The doctor told me I should take antibiotics and asked what kind I wanted. To clarify, I'm not a doctor, nor was I one at age 13. I told the psych doctor in a mental facility that I had mood swings sometimes, but that they were always caused by something and were not random. Then he asked me if I ever saw or heard things. I said, aside from 2 or 3 of those minor, unreal images we all have when we're trying to wake up, nothing really. That was probably the wrong thing to say, because then he diagnosed me with having schizoaffective disorder. It tore my parents apart, and I had to explain to them several times that this guy was full of crap and blowing things out of proportion. Fortunately, my next doctor wasn't so quick to rush to judgment. My coworker doesn't know how to transfer calls. She just tells people to hang up and call us again and ask the receptionist for someone else. I feel like we all have that one coworker, right? In 4th grade, I hurt my ankle during recess and told my teacher I thought it was broken. I mean, my ankle had swelled to the size of an orange. Of course, the teacher dismissed me and had me go to the nurse, who said it was just a little sprain. I walked home that day, 8 blocks, with a shattered ankle. When I got home, I showed my mom and we went to the ER and I had to wear a cast for 8 weeks. Thanks, Teach. I work as a summer rec director for the local school district, so I basically spent my days watching 30 children of various ages run around a playground and get into trouble. Now, some of these kids have special needs, and in that case may have an aide to help keep an eye on them. One day, some boys around 10 found a hornet's nest in the ground, and unknown to me, decided to poke it with a stick. This understandably ticked off the bees, so they started to swarm around the area. I realized and started to warn the kids to stay away. While I did, a boy named Tim with autism started wandering over, oblivious to the problem in my shouts. His aide just stood there and watched him do it. I ran across the park, grabbed him, and carried him away, slapping the bees the whole time. He got stung 5 times, twice in the face. The aide said she had a phobia of bees and didn't want to get too close. I'm sorry, but it's your job. You gotta take one for the team there. You grab the kid and you run. I'm sure you have a phobia of being hit by cars too. You wouldn't just let him walk into the street. I applied for an apartment at a nice apartment complex in my town, and several months later, I got a phone call about a maxed out credit card I didn't own. As it turns out, the guy who processed credit checks was opening credit cards with the info on rental applications and maxing them out. He was genuinely surprised when he got caught. According to the arresting officer, he had over 50 stolen cards when they arrested him. I had a situation like this happen at a place where I once worked where you could open a credit card in the store. One of the employees had a thing going where he was filling out fake applications and getting credit cards under other people's names. I remember the day the police came in and walked him out in handcuffs. You're always going to get caught doing something like that eventually. When working in a salon, this one girl would burn women on purpose with a curling iron if they annoyed her. She didn't last long. Bad attitude won't get you far. Well, yeah, you can't have an employee who's assaulting the customers. For the teachers out there, what are some stories about horrible parents you've had to deal with? I have a student who, while out on the playground, slapped another kid in the face. He was obviously taken into the office where the student then claimed that the wind blew his hand and that's what caused the slapping action. But it wasn't actually him. It was just the wind. It was a nice, sunny, mildly breezy day. Not at all possible. The student was in the office for physical aggression towards another student and looking at a 1-day in-school suspension. Clearly not his first offense. The principal calls home per the standard protocol in our district, and the parents believed his story, so much so that the parents actually came in with a lawyer to meet with the principal and to get all the charges dropped. Despite 2 noon aides and a kid with a nice red mark on his face, this student was sitting back in my classroom in the afternoon getting off completely for a blatant attack on another student. I feel like all he learned from this experience is that he can do whatever he wants, and his parents will let him get away with it to the best of their ability. These parents actually dragged their lawyer into the principal's office? Come on. A student of mine, first grade, came to school every day without a jacket, and when asked about it, he told me his jacket was too small and his family couldn't afford a bigger one. When winter came around, I raided the closet in the front office for a donated jacket for him. He lucked out, and there was a brand new jacket with matching hat and mittens in there, so I put them in a box I had laying around and tucked them into his backpack. They were a little big, so I hoped he'd grow into them. I told him there was a present for him in his backpack, but to wait until he got home to open it, as to not leave him vulnerable to questions and taunting from his classmates. The next day was warmer, so I wasn't shocked to see him without the coat. However, what was shocking was that his mother showed up at pickup in the family's SUV wearing that jacket. I had to have a talk with the poor guy and arrange for a recess jacket for him that he left in his cubby so his mom wouldn't take another one. You know, most decent parents would put their kids first and not steal the clothing off their back. My mom is a kindergarten teacher, and she had this one terrible student who not only kicked her in the face while she was helping him with his work, but he actually stole her digital camera from her desk drawer. She keeps it at work to take pictures of kids' projects and events and stuff to share with parents. His parents suggested that my mom shouldn't bend down to help students lest she be within kicking range, and to leave her valuables at home. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot of stories like this where parents are just raising little monsters. I don't think I have any worst stories, but I mostly notice a lot of trends. Parents are starting to tell teachers not to bother them with details about their child's education. For example, little Johnny's failing. Why are you calling me about that? I also notice quite a large number of parents who don't try to discipline their children at all. I had a student who was doing poorly and was always falling asleep in class. I called the father to talk and notify him about the marks, and to suggest that maybe he needed more sleep. The father said, "What am I supposed to do about that?" It's actually quite a common statement. The parents that bothered me the most were the parents of a boy with special needs. Every day they sent him the same lunch, macaroni with nothing on it. I asked them at the first conference why they did this, and his mom said, "It's not like he'll notice." It was sad because he really did notice. When we had special lunch days, he would get so excited about hot dogs or pizza. It's indicative of how well they treated him overall, and they didn't try to engage or stimulate him. I was one of 4 teachers in a conference with Dee's mother and a school counselor. I was the last of the teachers to talk, but I said much the same as the other teachers. Dee skips class all the time, yells out constantly, never does his work, and regularly calls you over to ask questions before farting. Dee was awful. Who behaves like that in 10th grade? Anyway, after all 4 of the teachers said essentially the same thing, Dee's mom looked at the counselor and asked, "I don't understand why all these teachers are lying about my son." Dee's 2 older brothers were in jail. I assume Dee followed in their footsteps. Sounds like this lady's just clueless. Not from a classroom, but I had this one parent of a kid in my Girl Guide unit who was just awful. When we first met her kid, she would always ask questions about everything, didn't listen to instructions, and would then ask questions about everything she missed, and was generally clueless. Then we met her mother, and it all made sense. The first time we met her, she tried to sell us life insurance. That was her job. And in the first 5 minutes of talking to her, she started about 4 topics, yet never finished any of them. She drove around in an uninsured car, the irony, and would often offer to pick up or drop off other people's kids as well. She was also always late for everything. Last to drop off, last to pick up. Here's where the story gets even worse. I guess she used to homeschool her kids, which is scary to think about. In grade 1, she put her kid in public school. Every time she had a problem with the school her kid attended, she pulled her kid from the school and moved her to another school. It got to the point where the kid had gone to 4 different schools in less than a year. Her learning was severely behind, and it was hard for her to make and keep friends. I feel so sorry for whatever poor teachers had to deal with this mom. I was a humanities teacher briefly, and I had a meeting with the mother of a boy due to his ongoing behavior problems in class. Bright kid, very creative, just couldn't stop distracting some of his classmates. No biggie, really. Mom brought our meeting to a premature end by announcing, "Readings for homosexuals," and storming out of the room, yanking her kid along behind her. Poor kid never had a chance. Not a teacher, technically, I'm a juvenile counselor. But on Monday, I saw a kid who was brought in by her aunt and uncle. Dad was in jail and mom was a junkie. I kept trying to help them come up with rewards for good behavior, like trips to the zoo, family picnic, an hour of outside playtime with the kid, and they just kept saying how no one likes her and how she hates everything. Worst was, when I was asking the kid what happens when you steal, that was her crime, she said, "You get abandoned." Ugh, that one will hit you right in the gut, won't it? One of my best friends is a French teacher who came from France and became an American citizen. He's white and after living here for about 5 years, got a job in a majority black school. After he taught there for a few months, a mom decided to play the race card, came storming into his classroom and said her daughter said he was the biggest racist she'd ever seen, then threatened to get him fired. He let her rant and rave in front of the class, and when she finally paused for a breath, he turned around his wedding picture. He's married to a black woman. He said her mouth dropped open, but no sound came out, and she kinda slunk out of the classroom. His kids were crying, they were laughing so hard. My mom is a special ed teacher. She had a parent-teacher meeting with the parents of a severely disturbed young man with multiple problems. During the conference, the mother casually asked, "I'm not really sure, but do you think that maybe the reason my son has so many problems is because I smoked meth every day while I was pregnant with him?" The whole room was in stunned silence for about 30 seconds before my mom piped up with, yes. I agree. That's probably the reason. Most laughable experience I've had was with a plagiarism case. Kid had ripped his entire essay off the internet. I'd googled a few sentences from his assignment and found the page where he got the stuff from and printed it out so the kid could see that the two copies were word for word. He aggressively denied it, so we got his mom in for an interview. I showed her the submitted assignment and the webpage printout, and her answer was that her dopey 15-year-old boy had actually written the Wikipedia entry on the Treaty of Versailles, so it wasn't plagiarism at all. Nothing like supportive parents. I teach at a dance studio, and last week some of my 2-year-olds just kept biting their arms for unknown reasons. When class was over, I let the moms know, and one of them looked at me and went, "She would never!" My mouth kind of dropped as I tried to gather words, and she quickly said, "No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted to see what it would be like to be one of those parents for a second." She scared the crap out of me for a minute there. If I become a parent, I'm gonna do this at least once. I've had my fair share of parental horror stories, as it seems most of us teachers have had, but I think it's time for a pick-me-up. I teach digital arts and technology at an inner-city public high school in a gang-infested, poverty-ridden, but culturally bright neighborhood. Last year, a student of mine, let's call him A, stole a MacBook laptop out of my classroom. After scouring video footage in detail, I identified the student who took it. The kid lied repeatedly to me about not taking it, and security couldn't find it on him or anywhere else at all. After escaping security, A picked up the laptop from another student, who he planted the laptop on earlier in the day, took it home, painstakingly cleaned the white keyboard and casing with a Q-tip, then promptly sold it to some dudes on the street for $500 cash. 2 days later, a random girl tells me about how A planted the laptop on the random kid. The accomplice admits, security calls A back in, and gets his father into the school. Dad is furious with A. He takes A into their car and makes A drive through the streets of the hood to find the dudes he sold the laptop to. Dad forces A to buy the laptop back from the guys he sold it to for a markup price of $600, which A paid. The next morning, Dad makes A return the laptop back to my classroom in better condition than when he stole it. Not one file missing and sparkling white MacBook. There's hope for us yet. We had to squeeze in at least one good parent, right? My stepfather was having parent-teacher conferences, and he was talking to this kid's parents. The parents had a question about when my stepfather was going to go over the Civil War. My stepfather said it would be in about a week or so. The parents said, "Great, because we'll pull our kid from the unit. We believe the Civil War never happened, and we're under the Confederate government." My stepfather was flabbergasted and didn't know how to respond. Then the parents got up and said to him, "We'll also pull our kid for the World War II unit because the Holocaust was made up and never happened." Some people just love to believe what they want to believe, don't they? I could list all the terrible phone calls, conferences, and emails where parents blame everything except their child's actions for the reason they're in trouble. They're so numerous, I can't even begin to count them. The one that's different than all of those, and the only one like it that I've encountered, was one with one of my AP English students. It was a typical parent-teacher conference. AP parents were flying in and out, since almost all the kids are doing well. This one super sweet girl and her mother come in and sit down. I tell them she is a 99% in the class. 99% total, as in an A+. Without missing a beat, the mom looks at her daughter with big time attitude and says, "What can we do to get that to 100? My mouth dropped. I said, "Well, we still have a semester, so there's time for extra credit." And then I made a mistake of adding, "But you know a 99 is really great." That was a mistake. The mom jumps out of her chair and starts yelling at me that I should mind my own business, and that she has high expectations of her daughter to become more than just a high school teacher. I hate parents, which is why I don't plan on ever becoming one. This mom needs a reality check. Her daughter's doing great. You have no need to be so hard on her. No worse story, but after 25 plus years in the classroom, I can tell you that awful kids generally have truly messed up parents. It's pretty shocking, really. Frequently horrible, in fact. We've had teachers physically attacked during parent conferences in our nice little town in the heart of America, and the parents get a slap on the wrist. I like teaching and have had a rewarding career, but I would not do it again. I don't want my kid to become a teacher either. That really says a lot, doesn't it? A story from my friend who's a high school teacher. A student turned in an exam with suspiciously similar solutions to a person near them. From past performance and the seating arrangement, it was clear which one of them was copying. My friend had some of the other teachers look through the exams to see if they would notice the same thing, which they all did. The student's mother came in and said that the teacher just didn't like her daughter and was just accusing her of cheating for that reason. When the principal said that several other teachers agreed with the assessment that her daughter had cheated, the mother said, "Well, then the teacher put her next to a good student to force her to cheat so she would get in trouble." I'm sorry, what? Is this lady delusional? My mother is a teacher. This is only the worst one. There are more. She was teaching a class in elementary school that had a severely mentally handicapped girl in it. I'm talking constant drooling, unable to form words, just grunts and moans and yells. She clearly belonged in special ed, but her parents refused. They insisted she be put in a normal class because she doesn't need special ed. The classes were completely useless for her, and her noise and mess seriously disrupted the education of 30 other students. The school even had to pay an aide to be with her all day because she couldn't take care of herself. When the school finally decided to go ahead and put her in special ed, the parents sued the district because apparently their 12-year-old with the mentality of a 3 to 4-year-old did not belong in special ed in their minds. Teachers had to spend their days in court instead of their classrooms, and my mom had to deal with lawyers and parents telling her she had no idea what was best for their kid. The only winners in this scenario are the lawyers. My dad is a principal and once suspended a girl for wearing a shirt that showed her whole stomach and then refused to put on another shirt to cover herself up. This was not her first or her worst offense, and he was fed up. The parents came in to discuss the situation. The dad didn't want to believe his daughter should be suspended, so he attempted to lunge at my dad and fight him. He called him all kinds of names and said he was going to mess him up. I can't remember, but I think the dad ended up getting arrested. My story isn't so bad, but I once worked with a parent who was really racist and tried to build a completely ridiculous case about why her son couldn't work with our black instructors. She wouldn't even look at them. Other than that, I'm constantly dealing with parents who are completely in denial about their children's abilities and have insane expectations, which is pretty horrible. All parents want their kids to be amazing and be the best, but let's be honest, not all of them have that potential. My wife is an experienced teacher. We live in a fairly rural northern area, and the school she just left is in one of the poorer towns. Typical bad was going an entire year without ever seeing a kid's parents or getting any response to correspondence. Also typical was kids without coats, hats, or gloves. She collected from our friends and left extras out in class. She had her personal property stolen all the time. Worse, kids dealing in the 7th and 8th grade, girls cutting and drinking and things like that, to dealing with assault trauma, girls pregnant, boys with fractured skulls, lost eyes, and fights with older boys and adults. Worst was a stretch of 7 years in which every year she had at least one of the following: kid's parent murdered, kid murdered, one time 2 in 1 year, kid's parent murdered the other parent, kid's parent took their own life, or kid's parent murdered another parent then took their own life. I finally convinced her she's paid her dues and she needed to take a break for her own sanity, making $20,000 less now at an alternative school, but doesn't cry every day. That's gotta be a heartbreaking situation to have to deal with every day for years. I can't begin to imagine. I had a student whose mother had divorced his father and both had remarried. He lived with his mom and stepdad, and his biological dad wasn't in his life. Just before his freshman year of high school, this was the year I had him, his biological father allegedly assaulted his stepdaughter and was facing possible jail time. For reasons that are a complete mystery to me, my student's mom started giving all the money she could to the father to help pay for legal expenses. I have no clue why she would do this, and especially why the stepdad would agree to it. My student had no winter coat and received nothing for Christmas because they couldn't afford it. All the money went to his deadbeat dad instead of him and his siblings, and he had a 5-year-old sister with special needs. The saddest part, he told me he was sure his father was guilty. Why would you take away money from a child who has all kinds of potential to give it to a scumbag who's just going to be going to prison? We had an over-attentive and incredibly enthusiastic parent of a 4-year-old girl that suffered from shaken baby syndrome. The child was very emotionally stunted, couldn't walk, and could barely speak. It was really sad, and she wasn't making much progress. Whenever we would get time to talk to her mother about her daughter's care, she would immediately change the direction of the conversation to be about herself. There also were several stories floating around in regard to how her child got this way. Absolutely none of them made sense and were constantly changing. Without giving away a lot of personal information, over time it became pretty obvious that super special ed mom had some kind of Munchausen by proxy. But we had no proof, and just had to watch the little girl for any other signs of abuse, such as incorrect medications, cuts, or bruises, and if found, report it to a nurse and guidance counselor that would alert CPS. I left a few months after this drama and never heard any follow-up about it. My first and only year teaching 8th grade was a doozy. I was 21, and all my energy and excitement about teaching was quickly zapped by parents dead set on proving me incapable of doing my job. I had parents sending graded papers back to me with my comments corrected and challenged. One day, I was called into the headmaster's office to discuss my use of foul language in the classroom after a parent learned I had told a kid to stop dorking around. The worst by far was a mother who somehow got my cell number and just constantly harassed me at the end of the year, all because she wanted her child to get a wholly undeserved A. This mother had a reputation, but I was in no way prepared for her full-out abuse. When her daughter, whom I'd repeatedly suggested to receive some kind of outside academic assistance, ended up with a generous B- in the class, she just lost it. I was visiting my sick grandmother when she started texting me, demanding to see the final exams. Being as they were final exams, I was not intending to return them to the students. However, this woman had the headmaster so wrapped up in her crazy that he called me and requested that I have my landlord open my house door so someone could go grab the exams while I was out of town. This is on top of the mom's text messages like, "You'll never work again," and "Those tests are mine. I paid for them. I want what I deserve." At what point does this kind of thing become harassment? I had a student who dressed in the goth fashion, black pants and metal band t-shirt, long hair and polished nails. He was bullied relentlessly by boys, girls, and even other teachers. Every day I'd try to fend off the verbal abuse, knowing my classroom was the only 45-minute reprieve he would get. Soon he joined science club just so he'd have a pass to eat in my room at lunch instead of the cafeteria. He was a really smart kid. He easily aced the tests and helped along the other students with labs. I saw him building friendships in class. Then he started skipping school. He started missing my class and falling behind. When he came back after close to 2 weeks, he was even more withdrawn. He came to class and he turned in all the work he'd missed. He checked my website, but skipped out on science club. After a few days of this pattern and him refusing to talk to me, I called home. My intent was to tell his parents how worried I was for him. My worry was he might hurt himself. I said, "Hello, I'm calling about your son blank. I'm his biology teacher." Before I could go any further, his mom says, "I don't need to hear it. I'm pulling him out of school tomorrow. He's his own problem now." She hung up on me and I cried. I talked to my principal and student counselor and they promised they'd look into it, but he was withdrawn from school that week. He's still in my mind 5 years later. I'll always wonder what happened because I was a little goth kid once too. That's great that you reached out to this kid that you saw was having problems. You probably really did something great for them. Sometimes it's a shame the parents have as much control as they do. What's your, "Oh, so that's what it was for" moment that took you too long to find out? Those little green swords at Starbucks. I had no clue what they were used for until I was complaining one day that my coffee gets all over the lid when I walk. My friend grabbed one and stuck it in the top of the lid and asked why I didn't use a stopper. A stopper! Oh my god, my life has just changed. I just learned something too. Of course, I don't drink coffee, but anyway. I'm sure we're going to be learning a lot of things this video. Not me, but my dad. He always likes to look nice and put together. One day before church, I was maybe 14, I asked him if he had a lint roller. He got it for me and it was absolutely covered in lint. So I ripped off the top sheet. My dad's eyes widened in shock. I always thought lint rollers were so expensive for how few times you could use them. He never knew there were more sheets underneath. Dad was in his mid-50s then. He hates when I tell that story. When I realized that the division sign is an empty fraction. Dude, you just blew my mind. That the approximately correct amount of loose leaf tea for 1 cup is a teaspoonful. That one makes sense. Not sure if this is a feature on all smoke detectors, but finally after 5 years of owning my house and getting used to grabbing a chair and knocking the batteries out of it, I just hit the test button on the front when it went off while cooking. Hush mode activated. It turns it off for 15 minutes and automatically turns itself back on. It felt like unlocking a secret character in Mortal Kombat. For years, I've had this electrical outlet on my back porch that's really intermittent. The thing works about half the time, then stops working for a couple weeks. Really frustrating. About 6 years after I bought the house, I also figured out what that one switch in the living room does. You know the plastic hooks on vacuum cleaners that are used to wind the cord around? Well, the top hook will spin 180 degrees to release the cord, so you don't have to spend time unwinding. I didn't realize this till my wife showed me well into my 30s. It took me 4 years of owning a car to realize I could spray washer fluid onto the rear windshield. I just assumed it only sprayed the front, and I would occasionally throw a bucket of water on the back if I needed to. Then one day, I just noticed an odd symbol on a lever I hadn't seen before. Held that mother down for about 10 seconds before a massive gush of liquid burst out of the back and changed my life for the better. I feel like that last sentence out of context could really go the wrong way for you. Clapperboards in movies. They're used as a visual reference to sync the audio and the video together in editing. Have you guys seen those escalators with the green lights shining through the steps? When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I asked my dad what those lights were for. He told me they were for the blind. A few years ago maybe, when I was about 23 or 24, I got on one of those escalators with lights again with a friend of mine. I wanted to tell my friend this little fact that my dad had told me years ago about the lights in escalators. But as soon as I wanted to explain, I realized my dad was trolling me the whole time. It took me just under 20 years to realize it. I think we all have that one thing that we were told as a kid that took us way too long to realize wasn't true. I was a housekeeper for someone years back when I was in college. Side job, extra money. I would see short straws in random places at the house where I worked. I usually just picked them up and threw it in the trash can. It took me 2 years to realize the person I worked for had a drug addiction and he was using the straws to snort. Now I look back and I'm glad I wore gloves to clean other people's houses. I bought a used pickup truck in the late 90s that had an electronic key fob like any car does these days. It had a couple other buttons as well that, when pressed, seemed to do nothing. I asked them about it at the dealership and they told me it was probably for a remote start that wasn't hooked up. After 2 years of driving that truck around in cold Chicago winters, I sold the truck to my brother when I bought my first new car. One day, while talking to him, he started the car up with the remote starter. I stared in complete shock as he explained that you have to hold the button down. It's always a humbling moment when someone knows how to use something that was yours better than you do. I had no idea that salad spinners were to dry your salad. I thought they were to mix your salad dressing or something. We got one as a wedding gift. So I loaded one up, dumped some dressing in, and it spun a ton of the dressing off the salad. This made me think that the product was to apply dressing flavor to all of your salad bits without dealing with all the extra calories that come from overloading on the dressing. So naturally, I thought it was a total waste of time and money and tossed it into a cabinet to never be used again. A year goes by and I see a comment on Reddit about how salad spinners are such a game changer and so worth it. And I thought people were just crazy. Nope, I'm the idiot here. They're to dry your washed salad bits so you have nice, crisp, non-soggy salad. I had no idea, and the box sure as heck didn't tell me that. I worked with a guy on a construction site and it took him 7 months to realize that the porta potties had urinals in them. He thought that the bowl was in there for a sink that they put in the nicer ones. Just today at the gym, I forgot my shower sandals and I was like, oh sweet, they have disposable slippers just in case of such an event. I put them on and walked through the change room, used them, they worked well, until I realized that they were shower caps. I mean, you can use them for that. After high school, I was working a temp job in a business remodel. The wood floors had been put in, and the contractor had a big roll of paper that he taped down to cover the floor to prevent scuffs and scrapes while the work continued. One time I touched the roll of paper and noted that it was somewhat sturdier than normal paper, and reminded me of the craft paper that we used in elementary school. Then I remembered that as a child, the teacher always called it construction paper. The bagel button on toasters only toasts one side of the bagels or bread or buns. When I was a kid, I had a large toy box with a lid. I had to use my head to prop up the lid when I grabbed things. There was a place to put a stick to prop it open. I noticed that there was a stick kept in the kitchen for me and my brother's spankings. By the time I realized the stick was originally meant for the toy box, I had outgrown the toy box. Your parents were essentially beating you with your toys? That's kinda messed up. The wiggly metal bracket on the end of a tape measure is like that on purpose. The amount it wiggles matches its thickness, so you can take inside measurements and push it in, or outside measurements and pull it out, and you'll get consistent measurements. I lived in the US for a year, and I was really annoyed about our light switches. They didn't lead to any lamps. There were no lamps in the ceiling at all, and I couldn't figure out why we had switches on the wall. I was also super annoyed that a few sockets worked sometimes, but not all the time. I never talked to our landlord because frankly, he scared me. And since I was moving back soon, I just figured I'd live with it. Fast forward 11 months when I visited a friend's house. I couldn't turn on her big floor lamp. Just do it like this, she said, and flipped the light switch on the wall. It turns out in America, light switches can lead to sockets in the wall. I can see how that would be incredibly frustrating to someone who's not used to it. For years, I thought those weird storage pod thingies some cars and vans have on the top of the roof were mini canoes. As in, I kinda thought that until I was like 24, but was too nervous to ask anyone. Since as long as I can remember, my mom has kept this creepy doll hung up on our wall in our garage, right next to the door to go into the house. The thing's a real eyesore. Clothes are ugly, and it's just this raggedy thing. So recently, I asked my mom why the heck she keeps this ugly demon doll hung up on the wall, and she says, "Really? It holds plastic bags." She walks up to it and pulls a plastic grocery bag out of its butt. 19 years in that house, and I always thought my mom just had some weird taste in decoration. To be fair, you could use anything as a plastic bag dispenser. It doesn't need to be this creepy doll. I think your mom's taste is still a little off. That I did not need to put eggs in the refrigerator egg holder one by one. That instead, I could put it on top of the eggs in the case and simply flip it over. Well, yeah, but then all your eggs are upside down. That dryer sheets prevent static cling. I always assumed you put them in to make your clothes smell better. So when I moved out, I just never bought any. Then one day I had to do laundry at my mom's house. In the middle of switching the laundry, I'm complaining about the socks all stuck to the blanket. And my mom says, "Well, put in a dryer sheet, dummy." Oh, so that's what those are for. Those travel toothbrushes. I always carried one on me and always wondered why they made them so tiny. Until one day on vacation with my girlfriend, I'm using it and she says, "Why don't you use it normally?" Then she grabs the casing for the toothbrush and attaches it to the bottom of the brush. Mind blown. I always wondered why there was a G in the stylized Disney logo, and it honestly took me like 15 years to figure out it was a D the whole time, and I was just an idiot. So I was a first-year medical student and was late to class and ran in sweating through my Oxford shirt and khakis. The lecturer was some esteemed local windbag cardiologist. As I sat down, he stated very grandly, "The most important part of the stethoscope is the part between the earpieces." I took my stethoscope out and started looking at the little spring thing that connected the two earpieces together, trying to figure out why that little cheap part was so important. After way longer than it should have, it occurred to me that he was talking about the doctor's brain, and dropped my stethoscope like it was hot and hoped no one saw me examining the little spring thing. Condensed soup. I always wondered why the cans were smaller yet tasted super salty and were thick. I never took the time to read the instructions about how you're supposed to add water. I went 39 years without knowing. One day, I finally asked my wife, and after she stopped laughing, she explained it to me. Growing up, my mother raised me to never look in her purse because it was rude to rifle through other people's belongings. At 7 years old, I felt like a rebel and looked through her purse while she was out gardening. I found her lipstick, wallet, and an odd-shaped canister that looked like perfume. I figured, let's give it a shot, and sprayed some all over me, mostly my face. What I didn't realize was that it was pepper spray. I ran around screaming in utter pain. Lesson learned. I mean, she tried to warn ya. When I was a kid, my grandfather and I built a model of the 1989 Batmobile together. We worked so hard to get it together. With neither of us having built models before, it took hours. We finished up and we had one green piece left. We looked through the instructions and looked all over the model. Could not figure it out. Finally, I went and got my grandma to see if she could figure it out. She came in, took one look, and it was the top of the superglue. We had forgotten to recap the superglue. You must never forget about the piece of resistance. Took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that movie is referring to a moving picture. It's an old-fashioned term, similar to talkie. The metal square thing on a stapler can be turned around so the prongs of the staple go outwards instead of inwards. It's a lot better for temporary staples, much easier to undo. I was at an antenatal class with my wife when the instructor shared a tip for making sure you let your baby feed from each breast an equal amount, by taking it in turns left and right which one you start off with. How do you remember which one you started with? You use a hair tie. A few minutes later she remarked, and don't forget to put the hair tie on your other wrist when you next do a feed. To which I remarked, rather too audibly for a room of 20 strangers, oh, you put it on your wrist. Oops, I was a bit slow that day, and many other days. For a split second while reading this, I thought the same thing. That the pockets on suit coats and blazers and back pockets of slacks are loosely stitched closed and meant to be cut open. I spent 4 years of my life as a ticked-off pragmatist. Why the heck would you put pockets just for show? Those jerks. One day, a friend heard my incessant complaining and goes, you just make a small snip and pull the thread out, then the pockets are accessible. I go to the closet and snip open one of the pockets. Well, don't I feel stupid? I had just bought my first house and needed to patch a hole in the bathroom fan exhaust duct in the attic. I was walking around Lowe's thinking, I wonder what sort of tape I should use for ducks. Then it hit me. Duct tape for ducks. Thank you, my friend. I never put that together. Potato peelers have a little indentation on the end of them. It's used to scoop out the black parts of potatoes that you don't want to eat. My mind alternates in this thread from, I didn't know that and it's really cool, to how the heck did someone not know that? Pipe cleaners. When I was a kid, they were used for crafts and stuff, and I just figured that they were used to clean like kitchen pipes. In my kid brain, that kinda made sense. As I grew up, I just never really thought about it again. Then one day in college, I decide cigars are expensive and pipe tobacco seems much cheaper overall. Plus, the rustic feel of a man on his porch reading with a tobacco pipe always appealed to me for some reason. So I went out and bought a cheap tobacco pipe, and while I was checking out, the cashier asked me if I wanted pipe cleaners. The scales just dropped from my eyes. It took 20 plus years to learn that pipe cleaners were used to clean, pipes. I've been driving my Chevy Silverado for 9 years before I realized I could lower the seat height. It had been at max elevation the entire time. First time in the past decade I've been able to see the sky out of my windshield while driving. Q-tips. I'm British. We don't call them Q-tips. And I didn't know what they were until I was in my mid-20s and saw a meme with a photo of a Q-tip. I was genuinely shocked. People never actually use them in books or films. They just say stuff like, I think you need a Q-tip, if someone misunderstands something. I thought it was like saying, get a clue. And I'd always just assumed Q-tips were a reference to some kind of American game show. This one's just a cultural difference and a very easy mistake to make. Don't worry, we understand. In the song I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus, it's Daddy dressed up as Santa Claus. I didn't realize this until my late 30s. Yeah, the song takes on a whole new meaning when you realize Mom and Dad are just doing a little role play. Grapes on the front of raisin packages. My girlfriend told me last year that raisin and grapes are the same thing, and I laughed it off because that's nonsense. Then I saw a big grape on my raisin box. Yes, and I'm 33 years old. I never got the euphemism of Blink-182's album, Take Off Your Pants and Jacket. I just thought it was a dude getting ready for bed or something, not taking off your pants and jacking it. That makes total sense considering the band. My boyfriend was around 21 when I had to explain this to him, but he asked me to have dinner at his parents' house and I asked what we were having, and he said roast beast, and I laughed at him making a Grinch joke, and then he asked me what I was talking about. I mentioned that he called roast beef roast beast, and that the Grinch reference was funny, and I realized he seriously had no idea what I was talking about. So I had to reveal to my boyfriend that roast beast is not an actual thing. It's called roast beef, and roast beast was strictly a Dr. Seuss reference. He was a little embarrassed, but it was really actually so adorable. I have a similar one to this in that I called it grilled cheese for the longest time instead of grilled cheese. It's just the way my ear heard it for some reason. I know it doesn't make sense. I learned at 27 how to properly clean a toaster. I didn't know there was a trap door at the bottom of it. I showed an Ivy League friend of mine and their mind was blown. You know, we all have gaps in knowledge sometimes, and sometimes they overlap with your friend. The fact that pineapples don't grow on trees. They're just plants. I didn't know this until I was hanging out with my friend and we were swimming in her pool. I got out and pointed to what looked to me to be a weird spiky looking plant, and she looked at me completely dumbfounded. She just looked at me and said in a disappointed voice, "That's a pineapple." I felt like my whole life at this point was just a lie. For the longest time, I genuinely thought pineapples grew on trees. That the reason baby vests have envelope shoulders is so that when they do a poop that explodes all over the vest, you can remove the vest downwards instead of lifting it over their head and smearing poop all over their face. When you first walk into a Home Depot, there's always a stack of orange buckets by the entrance. And for the longest time, I thought they were Home Depot's equivalent of a shopping basket. I'd haul that thing around just throwing screws and hardware into it and then just put it next to the cash register when I was done. They'd always ask if I wanted the bucket too, and I just thought it was a clever way of selling more buckets. Only about a month ago did I realize they're just buckets, and everyone at Home Depot just thought I was mentally imbalanced. Hey, you know what? You're making use of it. I'm not going to fault you on that one. When I finally figured out why Dad's special cigarettes smelled so different from regular cigarettes, then his room full of blacklights, incense, psychedelic art, and old-fashioned pipes made a lot of sense. I got my driver's license while only using the clutch pedal for driving in reverse. I didn't even know you had to use your accelerator until my girlfriend pointed it out after having my license for over a year. I would think the instructor would have caught that one, but I guess that's on them, not you. When I was little, I was fascinated by TV guides. I thought shows on television were just aired totally at random. I used to stare at the TV guides and whisper, "How do they know?" The image of this one is just kinda cute. As a toddler, I always loved it in church when we'd sing about some bear named Gladly, and who happened to be cross-eyed. Every time, it painted a cute picture in my child mind. A cuddly teddy bear with crossed eyes and a sweet smile. I'll never forget the disappointment of learning to read and opening the hymn book for the first time to Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear. I had to explain to a friend of mine who was 19 at the time that large people were obese, not a beast. I have earbud headphones, and where the cord splits, there was this slider thing. The whole time I thought it was something to adjust the length or something. Then I found myself untangling my headphones, and I said to myself, if these two ends didn't split up, things wouldn't be so bad. Then it hit me. That sliding thing was there to keep the ends together and stop it from getting tangled. Some people also use it to just tighten it up to your chin if you're going to be moving around and working out or something, but that's one way to use it too, I guess. Not me, but my brother. He would have been around 15 at the time. We were at an amusement park in line for lunch. My mother turns to him and asks what he wants. He pauses for a sec, then says, "I want a cheeseburger, but with no cheese." At this point, I do what any older brother does and start to laugh a little bit and ask him the question again. Same response. At this point, he knows he's doing something stupid. So I ask him, "You mean a hamburger, right?" He says, "I don't want ham." You know, I can see how that could be misleading though. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.